Sunday night edition of the Crash the Pond podcast. Jake, we've got Ducks hockey games to talk about, real games that happened that we have to dissect. I hope you're ready for it.
It's been a while. It's been, what, 10 and a half months, basically? Something around there? Like, it's been
double-digit months.
We should actually just say this. We have never covered a game as Crash the Pond.
Yeah.
This is the This is the very first Crash the Pond podcast that we will have covered a game on. And to start out, let's just get to this real quick. We have some new subs on Twitch, so I want to give them a shout out as they're jumping in. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lewis X209, resubbed for 28 months. Fat Geralt resubbed for 2 months in a row. Hey Yo D-Flow resubbed for 4 months in a row, and we have a little bit of a hype train going in there. So thank you guys so much for doing that. We also have a little bit more housekeeping to get to, right? Before we start jumping into some games.
Shirts.
Yes. So now up on the blog at crashthepond.com/shop, we have, and if you're watching this video on YouTube or on Twitch, you'll now see the screen. We have some merch. We've got some shirts and some hoodies. So go check them out if you've ever wanted to rep the logo, rep the Crash the Pond blog. You can now do that. So really fun, really excited.
Sweet. Yeah, I gotta say the logo looks really good on the hoodies in particular. I mean, for those colder nights, you know, if you either live in SoCal, outside of SoCal, it gets pretty cold at night. So the hoodie's pretty perfect for that. And once things do warm up, t-shirts, that little logo in the corner on the left chest, it looks really good. It looks clean cut look. You know, we're big time critics of jerseys and jersey design. So, you know, a lot of thought went into this to make sure they look right, to make sure that you look good wearing them. And we've got you covered. So just make sure to go to crashthepond.com/shop.
And hopefully by next week's show, we will be able to be models of the shirts. So look forward to that.
Oh, yeah. I'm really looking forward to that. I'm sure everyone else is too.
Yep. So
okay. Well, let's just dive right in because we legitimately have a ton of stuff to talk about, which I gotta say is a pretty nice change of pace from the months that we and our listeners, of course, had to endure. Hopefully, it wasn't too terrible, but it's all behind us now. So let's just forget about it. Let's start with this. So it's been a whole week since we last spoke, and a lot of things have happened. The Ducks did set their opening night roster. So you want to start there?
Yeah, so one of the big surprises, honestly, for this opening night roster was that Max Jones, first off, was placed on injury reserve. It was a situation where I don't think it had been reported at all that he was injured, and then it comes out that he's starting the season on the IR, and in addition to that, he actually got injured about a week prior, and so that really kind of came out of the blue, and so in order to make it work, what they had to do was they put Brendan Gooley actually on a long-term injury reserve because of the amount of games that he's going to miss. And so they were able to do that prior to actually submitting opening night roster. They were able to get full cap relief as a result. And due to that, they were able to then get underneath the salary cap and be pretty tight up against it, put Ryan Kessler on LTIR and make it, or basically get to that 81.5. And then activate him on LTIR, get some relief there. And so the opening night roster, just to run through it real quick, it was Ryan Getzlaf, Adam Henrique, Jakob Silverberg, Rickard Rakell, Danton Heinen, Sonny Milano, Derek Grant, Troy Terry, Carter Rowney, Nicolas Deslauriers, Isaac Lundestrum, Sam Steele. And then on defense, it was Cam Fowler, Hampus Lindholm, Josh Manson, Kevin Chattenkirk, Jacob Larson, and Yanni Hakanpää. In goal, it was John Gibson and Ryan Miller. On the taxi squad, it was David Backus, Cody Karan, Vinny Lettieri, Anthony Stolars, Andy Walensky, and Maxime Comtois. And then kind of as I had mentioned kind of over time that the Ducks were going to be using this taxi squad, and even if they had a 20-man roster to start the season on opening night, that was quickly going to shift. And on, Thursday, we saw that shift happen right away where the Ducks activated both Maxime Comtois and at the time, Cody Karan off the taxi squad. Cody Karan was the healthy scratch on Thursday, with Maxime Comtois being the player that drew into the lineup. The notable exception, and this happened last week, this was after we actually recorded last Sunday, I believe it was on Monday this came out, or maybe it was Tuesday, but Trevor Zegras sent to the AHL. And this caused a little bit of a kerfuffle for me.
Kerfuffle.
Let's go with that. Enjoyed that?
Interesting.
Enjoy that?
I'm glad he used that word. Yes,
Yeah.
of course.
So it really was confusing to me at first because, I mean, to be honest, and I still kind of hold this opinion, the taxi squad and the fact that this year is such an odd season, it's the exact perfect time for teams to utilize that for their kids and to be able to bring them up to the taxi squad, get them playing experience, get them practicing experience. They don't necessarily have to play in every single game, but they can at least practice. They can be with the team, kind of learn the ropes of that. And this is such a unique season. Take advantage of that. You can have guys up with you and not burn games, and they may not necessarily have to go back to junior. There's a whole lot in the air. So use that. Have Trevor Zegras there. And instead they sent him down to the AHL, where at the time, all we knew was that the season was starting, I believe it's February 5th, and he was sent down to go to Gulls training camp. It then came out that the Gulls were supposed to play preseason games this past Saturday and Sunday. Those actually both got canceled due to COVID precautions. No real word on what that actually meant, but those were both canceled as a result. So there is a little bit more logic, I think, is the way you and I, when we discussed it off air, but to sending him down because he can get these preseason games as compared to just going through a 3.5-week training camp with no actual games. But it's still not the best logic in the world. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there's still, I mean, at least now you can make a more sound case for it of sending him down. But I view it as this, and this is kind of getting maybe a little bit too far ahead, but we already knew before the season started that the Ducks roster as a whole was kind of lacking in offense. And what did we see out of Trevor Zegras in the World Juniors? A ton of offense. And the Ducks had said that we are evaluating him as if, like this is his training camp. And because of the quarantine issues, he got one skate with the Ducks, and then they sent him down to San Diego. So what I was very confused about was, well, if you were truly evaluating him fairly in the World Juniors, which you wanted him to go to, then shouldn't he have done enough to get a spot in the roster? So that aside, this is a team that needed offense in the worst way on paper. We saw that bear out in the first two games, and there was really just no harm in getting him on the roster in the first place, because the worst thing that could have happened is that maybe he looks a little bit out of place in the first couple of games, however many you want to give him, and then you send him down, but at least you're rewarding him for what he just did. Yep. And instead, his reward is that he gets to go practice with the AHL team. And look, it's not going to harm his development, but it is I think as a team, you're leaving money on the table, essentially. You're leaving value at the door where, we don't know what Trevor Zegras is going to be like as an NHLer at his very young age of 19, but why not find out? I mean, and this is something that I was going to get into, but then you started talking about Zegras. If you can have Isaac Lundestrum on this roster, who has shown worlds less than Trevor Zegras in his respective amateur career, and because of his stint in San Diego last year, I guess the staff is more comfortable having him on the roster. If he can make the team, then I just don't understand why Trevor Zegras couldn't. It just kind of shows, and again, this is something that we'll talk about more, it shows where the staff's priorities are right now, because I don't think this is just an organizational thing, or solely an organizational thing. I think it's more of a coaching perspective, where I think they want guys who are going to go out there and kind of just play it safe, play not to lose. And what it turns out is that if you're playing not to lose, you're actually just hurting your ability to win. And that's kind of what we saw happen. Sorry, I know that it's try not to talk about the games too much, but I was not a big fan of the move. I was also not a fan, as you can tell, of having Lundestrum on the opening night roster, and I feel like all those things just kind of played out how I expected, at least.
Yeah, and Bonnie's in the chat asking how could they have known that the Gulls games this weekend would be canceled, and I think that...
No, they couldn't have known. I mean, I'm not criticizing that aspect of it in the sense that, okay, once he's down there, and there's at least a case that he's going to get a few games, get some reps. So I'm not... right now I'm not criticizing that.
I think the bigger picture is that you and I both would have had him on the NHL roster to begin with, regardless of if they had these games played on the weekend or not. He did well enough in the World Juniors, which was his quote unquote training camp, to earn a spot on this roster, to get a chance on this lineup. And I mean, anyone who wants to talk about Lundestrum is only a year older than Trevor Zegras. It's not as if Zegras is this really young talent. Isaac Lundestrum, if you remember, made this lineup out of camp as an 18-year-old. So it's not as if they aren't willing to give guys a shot right away. That's something they've done. They gave Comtois a chance right out of basically right after getting drafted. So I just don't understand really the hand-wringing about him needing the AHL experience when they didn't necessarily do that with Comtois, and they, granted, eventually sent him back down and they've let him develop, but they still gave him that shot, gave him that ice time to begin with. Same thing with Lundestrum. Eventually sent him back to Europe, but still he initially got that experience. And I just am not quite sure why that's not happening with your top prospect.
I think,
and real quick here, this is an important point. Anyone who wants to talk about maybe they want to keep him in the AHL for the whole year, not to burn a contract, I might actually argue for a couple of reasons that it's better to burn the year off his deal this year. First off, you don't really want to piss off your top prospect. That's not something you want to do long term. That you want to keep him happy because he's the future of the franchise. But regardless of that, this is a guy where he may not put up huge numbers this year, but he still could be a positive contributor. And the fact that those numbers won't be great actually could help. It will lower.
It's going to depress his asking price.
Exactly. So even though, yes, they will burn a year, he will hit RFA status earlier. And that second contract, well, yes, he does get it a year earlier. It may be less than what he would get if you have that extra year going into his prime. So that's where with these high-end players, I'd argue it's almost better to burn a year if you're looking at the long-term cap implication of it. And Fat Geralt says, burn a year or use a year. That's a good point. It mean you're using a year of his ELC. Ginger Wolf asks, is it possible that he was very bad in his short time in camp? I mean, he played. He was
one skate.
It was one skate, and they had him on a line with Milano and Backus. So
they had no intention. They had no intention of getting him on the open night roster. Now, what I would say is that I think that this is a bit of a product of the Ducks being in quote unquote win now mode. That if this were, I think that the reason that they were willing to bring up a guy like Comtois last year. That's true. 2 years ago, I should say, or I guess
they all melt. Yeah, they all mesh together at this point. 2 years ago,
and in addition, last year, is that even though the Ducks didn't say it publicly, it was pretty clear that it was kind of a transitional rebuilding type year. And this year is not that. This year is the complete opposite. They have been very public in saying that they are aiming for something higher this year, and bringing in a teenager for opening night. It's a bit of a risk, right? Or at least it's a perceived risk if you're the coaching staff. You'd rather someone who maybe you have a little more control over, who knows your system, who you can trust not to turn the puck over out there, who's just, again, a perceived lower liability. And I think that that's what happened here. I don't think that that's the correct approach, because just because you're less of a quote-unquote liability doesn't mean that you're adding more value in the end. And I certainly don't think that Isaac Lundestrum is adding a ton of value right now from basing it off of what he's done in the last couple of games. So let's carry on though here with just some preseason notes before we actually get into the games, because that's where the meat of this podcast is going to be, I think, or where it's going to be our launching off point. Did you talk about Ben Hutton already?
No, I have not. So Ben Hutton was, it kind of word went out, I think it was on Friday, maybe something along those lines. Thursday or Friday, that he was released from his PTO, and people were like, "Oh, are the Ducks releasing him?" All this different stuff. At the end of the day, technically, I believe PTOs cannot run past training camp for an NHL type player, and so his PTO was technically over. The Ducks then, I believe it was on Friday, they announced that they had signed him to a contract for 1 year, $950,000. Makes total and complete sense. He had never actually been on the ice with the Ducks. He had been in quarantine the entire time. You don't sign a guy to a PTO, have him quarantined just to release him. It was clearly obvious at the very beginning of it that he was signed to a PTO with a contract eventually coming, because they could not sign him to a deal at that time due to cap issues. This was a deal that was done after the fact, or once the Ducks were able to get cap compliant. It was very similar to kind of what the St. Louis Blues did with Mike Hoffman, a PTO to get him essentially on the team, get the paperwork started. Then once they're able to get cap compliant, give him the contract.
Yep. And so Ben Hutton, we talked about it quite a bit on last week's pod, so won't rehash too much, but he's a big upgrade for their third pairing. And although the third pairing has looked okay at times in the first two games, he is a proven commodity in that role, and it's a wise move from the Ducks because it really solidifies that third pairing and takes a little pressure off of the top two that we've talked about on previous shows.
Yes, and I think maybe kind of we'll get into it in a bit, but there's a lot of options I think that they can do with Ben Hutton, and I think he offers a lot of
And
different things that are important.
I think that they may look into them.
Yes.
I
So
think that they may explore those options.
so let's just get into it. So first game against Vegas came on Thursday.
Yep. So first game for the Ducks since March of 2020. Crazy how long ago that was, but it felt all too similar when the game first started. So the Ducks dropped that one 5-2, as of course you know by now. Gave up two quick goals to Jonathan Marchessault and Thomas Nosek in the first 2 minutes of the game. But the Ducks, to their credit, they clawed their way back in, thanks to a pair of goals from Maxime Comtois, who, I mean, we'll get more into him, but maybe it's the tinted visor, maybe it's the flow, maybe it's the tan, who knows? But he's looking pretty good out there.
Yeah.
Got two goals. I mean, one of them off of a really nice feed from Sam Steele, who I think looks really good through the first two games. And Ryan Getzlaf also getting a nice feed across to Comtois on the second goal. Comtois doing a good job, though, of corralling it with his skate, getting it back into a shooting position and getting it into the net. Scoreless second period. After that, though, things would kind of fall apart, I guess you could say. The Knights would score 3 unanswered goals in the third period, and that would pretty much seal the Ducks' fate. So very, very brief overview. I'm assuming most of you watched it by now, but what were some of your takeaways from that opener?
My takeaways were I was kind of pleasantly content with how they had played.
Pleasantly content.
I think
that is high praise.
Yeah,
high praise.
Because this is a very good Vegas team, no doubt. And if you look at the game flow chart, which I now have on the screen from Natural Stat Trick, you can see for expected goals purposes, Vegas actually held the lead. But if you were to change it to Corsi, the Ducks actually had the better of the shot attempts throughout the game. And I think that's really kind of what impressed me for this team was they started off really rough. No doubt about that. The 2 goals against came. It was off really bad errors. I mean, the first goal came with a really bad line change. The fourth line's out there, and I believe Delorier missed the guy that was coming down the middle, and Larson also missed him and ends up potting the goal with a great shot above John Gibson. And second goal comes with a missed assignment where you and I were talking about this. Danton Heinen and Isaac Lundestrum basically kind of have a complete miscommunication. Isaac Lundestrum does a flyby and leaves the guy wide open in front of the net. And these are just really bad defensive breakdowns, and it felt like the Ducks were going to be in for a long night with those types of defensive breakdowns happening.
It felt very Carlisle-esque.
Yes, and so I think the positives that can take away is that on the backs of, honestly, a really good shift by the Terry Comtois-Steel line where the Ducks were actually able to score. Terry actually started the entire thing with a good strip at the defensive blue line, led the Ducks into the zone with the pass to Steele, ended up getting some zone time, and then eventually Comtois was able to bury the puck. Kind of on the backs of that, the Ducks are able to start getting some of the flow going their way. And as you can see in the game flow, actually kind of dominating play and actually getting the better of it, at least from the shot attempt battle perspective throughout the end of the first period through the second period. It actually felt like at some points in time in that second period that they were going to take the lead, specifically, as we'll talk about in depth when the Steele, Comtois-Terry line were out. They allowed chances against, but they were the most dynamic line in terms of generating chances for, and it seemed like they were prepped to get it. And then in the third period, it just felt like kind of it all went awry. Felt like Vegas came back. John Gibson did not have a stellar performance in this game, and I think that is the difference between potentially getting a point out of it. You may be able to look at his game and say he's not at fault for a couple of these goals, different things like that. But at the end of the day, 4 goals on 28 shots is not good enough from an all-star level, elite caliber goalie. Especially the goal against Max Pacioretty at the end that beat him 5-hole. You'd like to see him be able to stop that. It's not as if he had a bad night per se.
Yeah, no, he had a bad night. I mean, just look at expected goals, 2.9 for Vegas, 11-5. So.
True, and so if he's able to be average, the Ducks potentially tie that game.
Well, the thing with the Pacioretty goal, just to kind of not a complete sidebar,
Sure.
but even though it looks bad because it was 5-hole, but Max Pacioretty is a high
A
level
great,
shooter
yeah.
who's all alone close to the net. Even though it went through the wickets, it's still
No, true.
you're not necessarily expecting or banking on a save there. Yeah, I mean, I think that what was impressive about that first game, if we're to draw anything positive from it, is that, and you've already alluded to this, but it started off looking so bad. It started off feeling like, here we go again. Nothing has changed. Just fast forward to next year. All these thoughts just rushing back. But
Yep.
the Ducks managed to stabilize things, and they made a game out of it. And in the second period, they actually, found a way to win the shot attempt battle at 5-on-5, 17-13, and didn't win the scoring chances, but it just felt like they were at least hanging in there with a very good Vegas team who did get to play in the bubble. So they've got a leg up on the Ducks. The Ducks haven't played all the way since March, whereas the Golden Knights got a pretty good run in the bubble. So I thought that it was kind of a good first feel-out game. That's how it's going to be a little bit with these series. As far as John Gibson is concerned, not the start you would want from him, especially given that if the Ducks are going to be successful this year, if they are going to make the playoffs or even contend for the playoffs, they're going to need John Gibson to be at a very high level. And he didn't show that at all. I don't think he was the reason that they lost, but he didn't make a difference. He didn't give them really a chance to win. And I know that might sound harsh. I'm not trying to disparage John Gibson. I just mean to say that he wasn't his usual standing on his head self.
The standards that he set for himself are extremely, extremely high, and it's not.
But even if he was just an average goalie, this was just not a good performance for anybody.
I would agree with that. So, kind of, let's run through real quick, kind of the lines for this game and some impressions, at least for the first game, on these lines. So the top line, the quote unquote top line for the Ducks in this game was the Adam Henrique, Jakob Silfverberg.
The Rowney line?
Oh, well, if we're going based on ice time, that would be... Sorry, in this game, they were not the top line. Not in game one. But
we'll get into that.
Yeah, it was the Rickard Rakell, Adam Henrique, Jakob Silfverberg line. So what were your initial impressions on this line in terms of the first game of the season?
They had an okay game from the perspective of, first off, if you just look purely at their shot metrics, you would think, wow, they had a really dominant game. Shot attempts were 13-6. When they were on the ice. And when you look at expected goals, things are not nearly as pretty. And I think that the expected goals tells the more accurate story, because when you were watching them play out there, I gotta stop saying you in the second person. That's such a hockey thing to do. Anyway, watch it. You got to. Anyway, so watching them play out there, I thought that they did an okay job of controlling the puck down low, cycling the puck, not allowing too bad of chances, but the real issue was that they just couldn't generate anything of substance. When they were controlling in the offensive zone, they weren't getting into the slot. They weren't getting high quality chances. They weren't even getting medium quality chances. They were just really non-factors offensively, and that's going to sink the Ducks. If they can't get anything out of that quote unquote top line, with really all three of them being established top six line NHL players, it's going to be really tough for them to win games, and you definitely saw it in game one.
Yeah, and one thing that I want to add for context here, and something that I think you and I discussed a bit today when we were texting, and also kind of on Twitter, we both mentioned this, but they were matched up against the Pietrangelo a bunch throughout this game and against the Stone line, and both those players are some of the elite defensive talents in the league. And so now, granted, they're going to be continually getting matched up against other teams' top defense pairing, top line or top defensive lines.
Yeah, but
as a
only
result,
one team has that level of line.
Exactly. So although they were not great offensively, and that is something that is a major detriment to the team throughout these games, with them being the de facto top line, I think trying to have a huge takeaway from this series as a whole for that line is going to be tough because of that matchup. I think the next series for this line is going to be huge to be able to see what they can actually do.
We'll
But
get into that.
yeah, I think that kind of adding that color to this, adding that context to this is very, very important when discussing that line. Now, granted, that doesn't excuse it. That doesn't say that it
No,
makes
it
it
doesn't.
okay, because at the end of the day, the Ducks lost this game.
Well,
If
and
if, if
also,
that line could have done something with their minutes, because they did play the most minutes out of any line at 5-on-5 in this game, the Ducks could have done better. They could have won.
well, and also, this is the expectation that they are going to be getting those tough assignments, and this is the drawback that I believe I may have brought up preseason, is that if you put all three of those guys on the top line, if I'm the opposing coach or the opposing staff, and you're sitting down for your pregame breakdown, they're probably thinking, hey, as long as we can shut down that top line, there's no other line on this team that's really going to give us too much trouble, or that's going to that's going to sink us. And the formula proved correct for Vegas in this game, and that's not going to change for the Ducks. Other teams are going to take note of that, and they're going to key in on that line. Now, other teams are not going to be able to do it as effectively as Vegas because they don't have the same level of talent to do so, but this is going to be baked in for their results. So it's not an excuse, because that's just the nature of their job.
Yep.
The expectation is that they're going to be able to fight through that. If they're not able to fight through tough matchups, then they shouldn't be the top line, or they shouldn't all be together.
Yep.
But something's got to change if that is going to be such a detriment to them. Now, on a positive note, I would say, or should we say the positive at the very end for this game? No, let's just jump right into it. On a positive note, even though their numbers, and this is going to be a recurring theme going into game 2 as well, do not look the greatest, I do think that Comtois-Steel-Terry line was very good, and I think that they gave the Ducks a fighting chance in this game. They were the only line that really generated noteworthy offense. You could make a case that the Getzlaf line had its moments in that game, but really Sam Steele setting up Max Comtois for his first goal, and then Max Comtois burying his second goal of the night. Troy Terry, as you mentioned, with a really nice transition play, which, hey, who's talked about that ad nauseum on a podcast before? Troy Terry being a good transition player. Couldn't be us, could it?
It couldn't be us, It couldn't be.
Us.
It couldn't
We
be.
hate Troy Terry.
It couldn't be us singing his praises for what, a year and a half now, or something like that.
Yeah, so Troy Terry doing what Troy Terry does, winning puck battles, getting it through the neutral zone, getting it to his teammates, to his line mates. That pretty much led to the first goal for Anaheim. And so those three, it reminded me a lot of how they looked when they were together in a prospect camp 2 years ago when they were dominating play. They looked a lot like that, and that's really good news for the Ducks. And I guess I'm just going to come out and say it already because I feel like it has to be said. I just think that Sam Steele looks like a different player through 2 games than he did last year.
He 100% does.
And I think it's a very important development for the Ducks.
It is. And you mentioned this. We had an article go up on the site with predictions and hot takes of the season or things like that, or maybe it was breakout player of the year. You had Sam Steele in one of those categories, and if he could become a legit third line, maybe second line center for this Ducks team, that is a huge thing for this team to move forward. And he just looks so confident. I think that I think previously he was very much making the simple plays at times, really dumping it in, not really didn't feel like he was very confident with the puck on his stick as a whole. It felt like he was kind of making the safe play all the time and not actually trying to make plays with it, not trying to do things with it on his stick. And it feels like in this game, he was skating with a purpose. He had the puck on his stick and was looking to make a play. And anytime he had it on his stick, he was looking to make a play. And a lot of times was able to generate it. He had a couple glorious chances in the game, missed a couple of them. So you'd like to see those get on net. Same thing in the second game. We'll get into that in a little bit. But that line was really generating a lot. And the thing is, it works as a whole because all three guys bring a very different style of game. And I think Sam Steele, the only criticism that you might want to have is that his defensive acumen in the series wasn't the best. He had some solid plays, but I think that that's something that he will need to work on as a whole to make this line better. But I mean, at the end of the day, yes, they had some issues defensively, but they generated the most offense. They were the most high event line for the Ducks out of the entirety of the series, and especially in this game, in the first game. And this is a Ducks team that's going to struggle to generate offense. They did in this series. They did in this game. And to have a line that can do that, you will take them giving up chances going the other way because they can give up or get chances for you. And I think that was my biggest takeaway from it. And they just looked really good. I think that Troy Terry and Sam Steele worked really well off of each other. And I think Comtois got himself into good positions to kind of prosper off of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do think that even though they did have some tough moments defensively, I don't think that they were totally on them. And
that's true.
If we want to even whittle it down, I think Comtois still looks a little shaky defensively. At times, he just looks either a little lost, or his head is in the clouds, or he's just not maybe hustling as much as he should when he's tracking back. And that's something that we knew about him last season, and it's still kind of in his game. But Sam Steele, I mean, he's moving his feet. He's a good eye test player right now. I mean, the numbers are not agreeing completely, but he's doing all of the right things, and he's getting rewarded already for it with that assist. One thing that looks different to me for him outside of the 23, which is definitely a good look on his jersey now, as opposed to the kind of funky 34.
It was so damn confusing at first to see 23. I kept thinking it was because I'm so used to that
he
number
just looks like a different player. I mean, everything about him. The thing with him that I've noticed is that I think physically he's matured a bit, because he does look a little quicker. He's quicker to get on the puck when it's a loose puck. He looks a little stronger. I think that giving him it gives him more time. You know, we've talked about this on previous shows, but with Darryl Belfry, famous skills coach, talking about what's your signature skill. Okay, you have your main skill, but then you need other skills to layer on top of that so that you can really bring out your main attribute. And so for Sam Steele, he is a smart player, and I think that he's got a good hockey sense, but when you're so far behind the curve athletically, it's going to be really difficult to bring that out if you're not just insanely talented. And so for him, being a little quicker, being a little stronger, it's giving him the time and the space, or allowing him to create the time and the space to find his line mates, to create those plays. And so I think he also changed something about his stick. I think it's either the lie or the length, but something looks a little different about his stick.
That type of analysis you'll only find here, folks.
I swear to God, I think his stick, the length changed a bit.
I mean, it's possible. I mean, these guys now have really specialized coaching, and if you listen to the interview with Adam Oates on the 31 Thoughts podcast, you will know that very quickly. That this kind of stuff matters. Doesn't Adam Oates want to get everyone with a toe curve or something like that?
Well, he wants everyone to use the P92 curve because it's like the most neutral curve, and then he also wants his pupils to use white tape, so that after their sessions are over, he can look at where the marks are to see how they're using their stick.
That is really smart, actually. That is really smart.
He also makes sure that the ice, well, I mean, this isn't really something that he does, but he makes sure that the ice is zammed or zambonied before, so that he can also analyze where the cut marks are when they're doing their drills to see how their movement is aligning and if they're cutting properly.
I mean, these are all really smart, heady things for him to do. It makes total and complete sense.
This stuff actually matters, but it sounds like it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it does. It checks out. But yeah, I mean, players mess with their sticks all the time, and I mean, if you've ever played, you know how much of a difference playing with a different curve has. How much?
I think his stick is a little longer now because he looks.
Well, a longer stick, shorter stick, a lot of things like that. It really does make a difference when you're playing it, and you notice it. And so I know Fowler a couple years ago, the season that he scored, I thought he made his stick longer and made it stiffer, and so he was getting heavier shots on net, and that led to a lot more goals from him or something like that.
That was just shooting percentage.
True. But anyway. Fair.
No, just kidding. But anyway, all this to say that Sam Steele looks a lot better, and outside of that, in that game, we're going to move on to the second game soon. We have something quick to talk about before that, but just to wrap up on this game, a couple of other things that I did want to hit. The Getzlaf line. I think that Getzlaf had one really, I mean, just kind of a vintage Getzlaf pass, outside of course, his assist, spinning backhand, kind of no-look pass to Danton Heinen, although it was a really nice play between the two, because before Getzlaf makes that pass, Heinen is at the top of the circle or top of the slot, and you see them they make eye contact, and then Heinen cuts to the net, and as he's charging to the net, then Getzlaf turns around and slings that backhand pass. But just to be able to execute that pass it takes a high degree of skill, hockey IQ, and confidence, which Getzlaf is not lacking in any of those. Heinen wasn't able to bury it because it's a left-handed shot. He got it on his backhand, kind of a tough play to finish off. But I like Danton Heinen next to Ryan Getzlaf because although he's not he's definitely not the most skilled line mate that Getzlaf's ever had. He does have a good motor, and he does have a decent enough hockey sense to where, as you saw in that play, he can keep up with Getzlaf's own ability to read the play, and that's going to be important moving forward.
Yep, 100% agree. And I think that Dan Heinen overall looks solid. I think that's the best way to put it.
Who have we not mentioned on that line so far? Not really.
The third player on that line, which is the one that was a bit of a surprise, is Isaac Lundestrum, and he was kind of invisible throughout the game. He really didn't look comfortable on the wing, I think is the best way to put it. It almost seemed like he didn't always know where his positioning should be, specifically in the defensive zone, as a winger instead of center. And anytime the puck ended up on his stick, it just didn't seem like he had the confidence to be able to make a play with it, and was just kind of defaulting to making a safe play, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But when you're playing with Ryan Getzlaf, he still has the creativity to create chances, and you got to be able to get there.
Yeah, I think with Lundestrum, he looked just out of his element in that game. I mean, if you go back and watch just the games he played during the break in the Allsvenskan, where, I mean, the pace is of the game compared to the NHL, it's like watching the NHL on triple slow-mo. I mean, and then you factor in the bigger ice. So that's where he's coming from right now. And yeah, sure, he had a camp and he has AHL experience, but he just looked out of his element, and he made these very low percentage plays where he would skate into the offensive zone, try to take a guy one-on-one when he's really the only Duck that's already in the zone, and try to make a move where, okay, if you get past him, great, but you're still at that point 1-on-2. Maybe you have an additional line mate or two in the zone, and then he wasn't able to execute those moves anyway, and the play would just die on his stick, and that happened a couple of times. And I guess good that he has the confidence to try to beat guys one-on-one, but it felt like some of the hockey sense that we've seen from him in the past, being able to find his line mates, just wasn't really there. It just felt like the game was just too fast for him, and that's not a good sign, because even though it's just one game, #it's just one game, it's the Ducks need these points now. They don't have time to.
Yep.
And this is why, again, putting Zegras in the AHL is just so baffling to me, because you have Lundestrum there, who is by no means, even though he's maybe quote unquote safer, is by no means an established talent in the NHL. And that's what you saw in game one. He really didn't do much of anything. And if anything, he was a negative, as you saw on the goal allowed, where he just kind of lost his man, or couldn't read that Heinen was switching. And by the time he kind of picked up on it, the puck was in the back of the Ducks net. So
yeah, and there was,
wasn't high on him in game one.
I mean, it's just it's hard. It's easy to make that comparison of, hey, here's a left wing slot. This is the exact spot well, no, but this is the exact spot that Trevor Zegras would come into. But yes, there's an easy swap also of Sonny Milano, who is on the Ducks roster currently because he is not waiver exempt, so he has to be on the roster and they're afraid they'll probably lose him to waivers. Maybe this was a play. I mean, maybe this is a situation where Dallas Eakins thought that if they were going to win, they would have to really have a safe player there, different things like that. So he thought Lundestrum was the better play over Milano.
Let's face it, he probably just scored a couple goals in a scrimmage.
Probably.
And that really just sold everybody.
No,
he's got to play. He's got to play.
It's definitely possible. I'm definitely trying to overanalyze it by trying to figure out why.
Isaac Lundestrum, terrible tape job. Terrible tape
hot
job.
take right there.
He only tapes. He's got the Kaliev tape job.
Oh, really?
He does, yes. It's a little more than Kaliev.
Oh, I know which one. It's the one. Yeah, now I got it. It's the one that you hate where it's just the toe. It's just the toe.
Yeah, I am not a fan of that. But it's an even more extreme version of that. Okay, right. Let's wrap up on this game very quickly.
Real quick. Let's just really quick wrap up fourth line and then quick impressions of the D. So fourth line, I thought they were fine. They were on the ice for a goal against overall.
Nicolas Delorier. They getting his scoring chances.
They got some chances, definitely for. I think that they probably played a little bit too much still in this game at 10:34. Not quite sure why they played that much as a whole, especially when you're trailing in a game. Especially, I can remember it was down in the final 10 minutes.
They also play out of every TV timeout, it feels.
But in the final 10 minutes, it felt, I think the Steele line only got 3 shifts, and I think I saw the Grant line get more shifts than that. So it was really puzzling there.
I feel like Dallas Eakins thinks that line is matchup proof, because he puts them out there after TV timeouts pretty regularly. And when you're the away team, that means that the other team gets to see that those players on the ice
Yeah.
and then decide who they're going to put out. And you're not really setting yourself up that well for success doing that, I don't think.
Yep, agreed. All right, early returns before we get into the game on the D pair. So Lindholm, Shattenkirk. I was thoroughly
But great.
impressed. Thoroughly
Yeah,
impressed.
I mean, Kevin Shattenkirk, the way that he plays the game, it's not flashy. It's not going to necessarily bring you out of your seat every night, but very solid, very smart player. And I think he's already making Hampus Lindholm's life a lot easier. I think Hampus Lindholm's enjoying this quite a bit. I thought Hampus Lindholm looked really good
He
in
did.
game one.
That looked like
he looks faster.
that looked like a legit top pairing NHL defense pair on a legit team. Also, like that was a really good D pair in that game. Generated play. It was a really good game for them. Fowler Manson, on the other hand, not so good.
Extremely shaky.
Yes.
And this is something that held up in game two, which we'll talk about, but just never felt settled in. Never looked like they were on the same page when they were breaking the puck out. And that's going to be something that they need to figure out in the next week. I mean, at most, because they can't afford to have their second pairing be this shaky. And that's just how it felt. At times they looked okay. At times Fowler would maybe get a nice rush, but Josh Manson's positioning, I think that it's like his compass is off or something, because he will make these pinches. He will make these attempts at open ice hits when there's just no reason to do it. And at one point it gave the Golden Knights a 2-on-0 because he tried to hit someone in open ice that Fowler had already covered. So I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just a bit of rust there. Maybe it's just the time off, but the clock is ticking, firmly ticking for those two.
Yep. And then Larson, Hockenpah.
This game was not that great for them. I thought that Larson, it looked like the puck just became a grenade every time it hit his stick. It just looked like he couldn't do anything with it, that he would just fumble it every time. Hockenpah, I thought, on the other hand, looked okay. I mean, he wasn't spectacular, but he did a good job of killing a few plays, using his frame to hold guys up along the wall. And when he had opportunities to make passes out of his zone or in the neutral zone, I thought that he was just okay, which on balance, that pairing was just okay. I mean, they broke even in shot attempts, which is which is huge for them. Expected goals, not nearly as good, but overall, it wasn't a terrible night for those two.
Yep, agreed. So, before we jump into the next game, let's have a word from our sponsor.
Yep, let's just get right into it. So, there are a lot of things that you'd probably like to leave behind in 2020. I think that we can all agree with that. One of the most important, though, being your old underwear drawer. If you're rolling into the new year with the same bunching, chafing, and uncomfortable underwear that you've got to check out Mack Weldon. Mack Weldon is an essential piece of my new daily routine. I mean, they've been supporting the show for a little bit now, Jake. And for me, at least, someone who doesn't really shop a whole lot for clothes, it's a bit of an Achilles heel of mine. It's been an absolute game changer, just the versatility of some of the products that we've been getting so far.
Yeah, it's been absolutely fantastic. I mean, I absolutely have loved my Ace sweatpants. They're absolutely fantastic. I actually now have 2 pairs of them, and wear them all the time around the apartment. Just really great loungewear. I mean, you actually texted me today that you were rocking your Sunday lounge pants.
Yeah, so a couple of products that I highly recommend. So one is that you just mentioned, the Sunday lounge pant. I wear it every Sunday because that's what the product's called, and it looks it looks clean enough to where you could go and, hey, maybe if you're a Sunday Funday type person, you could go get your mimosas or whatever you got to and look like you're put together. But if you're just sitting on the couch watching football, fighting off the Sunday scaries, whatever it may be, they are extremely comfortable for that. But the pant that I really want to vouch for is the Radius pant. For me, and this would probably apply to a few of our listeners who are working from home, I wear it during the day as I'm working in my little home office, and it makes me feel like I'm somewhat at work. They're very nice, they're very professional looking. But then once I'm done with work and I go down to my home gym, they're also designed so that you can wear them in the gym as well. And with also using Mack Weldon's underwear, very comfortable. And especially those radius pants, though, I just cannot recommend them enough. And I know that this might sound a little braggy or maybe doesn't matter to some, but I actually get compliments on them, and that's not something that happens to me in the clothing I usually wear. I've had people ask me, "Hey, where'd you get those pants?" So that's where you can get them with Mack Weldon. But
Yeah.
Jake, let's hear some more of the details.
Yeah, well, there's also some. I mean, you can get plenty of stuff. Obviously, you and I both love the pants, but I mean, I have socks, underwear, shirts. They have a lot of different versatile options there, and like you said, you can wear them with working out. You can wear them going out. You can wear them to lounge around. You can wear them on going out on a date. Basically, Mack Weldon is going to be there for you throughout your everyday life, and they have a wide range of customized fabrics that can keep up with you no matter what your day looks like, whether it's their 18-hour fabric, their silver fabric, their air knit, and a whole bunch of other different materials. And on top of that, they have a really awesome Weldon Blue Weldon Blue program. It's totally free loyalty program. Level 1 gets you free shipping for life. Once you reach level 2 by spending $200, you'll get 20% off every single order for the next year. Mack Weldon wants you to be comfortable, so if you don't like your first pair of underwear, you can keep them, and they'll still refund you, no questions asked.
So, for 20% off your first order, which, hey, 20%, that's a pretty solid deal. Visit mackweldon.com/CTP, so like our website, like our podcast, Crash the Pond, and enter promo code CTP when you check out. That's mackweldon.com/CTP, promo code CTP for 20% off. Mack Weldon, reinventing men's basics. So, on that note, should we try to reinvent how Game 2 went for the Ducks? Because it didn't go too great.
We could try, but I'm not sure if we'll be successful there.
So I think that, I don't know, is this game harder to swallow, or is this game, are you more down on how that game went than Game 1 went? Because I feel like Game 1 was easier to write off than how Game 2 went. I don't know. Maybe I'm completely wrong about that.
It's tough because honestly, Game 2, I was really expecting. It's almost like you could feel that first goal from Vegas coming late in the game, and you kind of expected them to tie it up with the way that the game was going. And so I think, at least just from my perspective, I take that the Ducks got a point out of this 2-game set as being a major positive, and now there may be others out there that say, no, they had a chance to win and they blew it, all this stuff. They had a 1-0 lead, but realistically, you can't expect the Ducks to be able to shut out Vegas. I just don't think that that's a logical conclusion to be able to make. And so I think that the fact that they were able to ink out or get out a point in this game is a very big positive. So I think from the perspective of swallowing the game, I think that this was a much more positive result. Having said that, I actually think Game 1, the Ducks played better. I think part of that is, granted, they were trailing for part of it, but I don't think the Ducks really ever got on the front foot in this game. It felt like the entire game they were kind of on the back foot, got a goal, and then really just tried to defend the hell out of the game. Whereas at least in Game 1, they were on the front foot trying to push.
I actually disagree with that a little bit. But so just to clarify, so the Ducks dropped that one 2-1 in overtime. Max Comtois stays hot, gets his third goal in 2 games, and sets some kind of franchise record doing that. One of those obscure ones, but still a record nonetheless. Gets his third goal in the second period, and it was off of quite the play. I mean, it's a play that you'll probably never see again, if we're being honest. So, and this all started, by the way, tweeted out this play on Twitter today, but Sam Steele, first off, knocks down a neutral zone pass from the Golden Knights, prevents them from really transitioning, and then tracks back correctly, gets to a spot, recovers the puck, and then as he's being pressured, just makes that split-second decision, feathers the puck over to Jacob Larson, who's open, and then down they went. Jacob Larson, Yanni Hakanpää, and Max Comtois on a 3-on-1. Name me a more threatening and dangerous trio than those three. I don't think I could name any, to be honest.
I went back.
I would be shaking into my boots if I was Marc-Andre Fleury there.
I went back and rewatched that rush a couple times today.
Oh, God.
Just, it is, Larson is so close to losing that puck.
Larson looked surprised that he was in that position. He he almost lost the puck, like you
Like
said,
two or three times.
Yeah.
He looked, granted, once he got to the face-off dots, he actually looked pretty solid and then made a really great pass to Comtois
Yeah,
to be able to finish it.
he just had to get there. That's
Yeah.
all it is.
But it almost looked like Bambi trying to figure out how to walk.
Well, here's the thing with Larson. We're talking about sticks earlier. I think his stick is too long.
It's
I
possible.
and I think he holds his bottom hand way too close to his top hand, and I think that's why he fumbles so many passes. His first touch, something we've talked about, his first touch is really problematic because he never seems to be able to make a play right off it. But anyway, on this play, first touches be damned, he was able to corral it, and maybe he lulled it. Maybe it was all
An elaborate play.
lull to the defender to sleep so that they wouldn't notice that Max Comtois had snuck in on the back door. He lasers it over to Comtois, who pots it, and that would give the Ducks a 1-0 lead. Now, in the first period, John Gibson, had to stand on his head, and I think that first period should quell any doubts of can John Gibson still be John Gibson? Because the Ducks, from every perspective, were just awful in period one. They were outshot attempted 27-13, scoring chances 18-6, high danger chances 6-0, expected goals 1.34 to 0.25. Just any metric, whether it's the numbers, eye test, they look bad. But John Gibson, the funny thing is that it was a very Carey Price-esque performance because he never looked like he was really compromising himself. It was kind of the opposite of what we've seen from Gibson maybe in years past, where he's flailing around a bit and still making the saves, but he was just very controlled, post to post, conservative in his movement.
But Felix,
I'm not going to use the trope because it's incorrect that a lot of other analysts will say, he was really confident standing at the top of his paint. No, it wasn't that. He was just controlled, and it paid off for the Ducks in that period, allowed them to survive.
But Felix, an NHL scout or NHL GM told me in an article on The Athletic that John Gibson never works on his game and he's just reluctant and his game has never changed.
Yeah, I don't think that person actually has watched John Gibson. Or maybe this is probably the downside of being an insider, is that you hear stuff and then it clouds your analysis. They maybe heard something about Gibson, and all of a sudden they're just basing everything off of that. Whereas if you use your own eyes and use maybe some supplemental data, you will see that, hey, this guy's pretty good. Pretty good at what he does. He's great now.
The only downside to him in the very beginning of the first period was I thought his rebound control was slightly suspect, but he cleaned that up real quick and was able to track the puck really well on his rebounds. No, he booted a couple.
Nitpick of all nitpicks.
It is a very big nitpick, but that is the only thing that I noticed in that was that he left some pucks laying out in front of the crease, but he was able to track down the rebound pretty well.
Maybe his rebound control looks bad because his team isn't able to recover rebounds.
That is a very good point and potentially the correct answer right there. But that first little bit from Vegas realistically should have scored there. If that game happens against any other goalie on any other night, they probably score.
That first period was like how the first period in game one could have played out.
Yes.
That's how the first couple of minutes went and how you thought it was going to keep going, but the Ducks managed to stop the tide. In this one, it just kept going. And hey, this is part of the recipe for the Ducks. It's not pretty. It's not ideal. It's certainly not what's optimal long term, but John Gibson is part of their equation.
Yes.
And when you have this going on in your net, this elite level goaltending, you have a chance. This is part of what could get the Ducks into the playoffs.
Yeah, and I want to give them some credit for this game. I don't love the strategy. It was very much a Randy Carlyle-esque.
Let's first move to period two, because
okay.
I think this is kind of this is truly a tale of three periods.
All right.
Period two, which you seem to maybe have overlooked. I don't know. Maybe you went for a bathroom break that lasted an entire period. I don't know. But the Ducks won the shot attempt battle 19-16 in period two. Scoring chances were 3-1. High danger chances were 3-1, and scoring chances were 15-7. And the Ducks didn't look like they were dominating play, but they were more than holding their own in that period, and that's when they got the goal from Max Comtois.
True.
So
fair.
I thought that period was by far their best period of this. We'll call it a series. I thought that was their best period so far, because not only were they hanging in there, but they were even thriving a bit.
Are we talking about just this game or this 2-game slate?
I'm talking about just the second period when you compare it to the entire the two games we've seen so far.
Ooh, I think I would actually say the second period of the first game they played a significant amount better. That was the period where I think they really started taking control and getting on the front foot. Whereas, yes, I think that you are right. They did have the better of the scoring chances and the shot metrics.
They got outchanced in the second period of game one.
No, they didn't.
Sorry, for high danger. They got.
So I'm purely looking at expected goals for. They were 0.654, 0.38 against in game one. This one 0.31, 0.31 against, 0.55 for.
Yeah.
So
okay. Let's just say that they had that second period was one of their better periods. Of series.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, and maybe the second period of game one was. The looks they did get were maybe just way higher quality, but this one I thought that it was just like a steadier effort. But then the problem was they got that lead. They got that 1-0 lead, and they went into this third period, and it felt like they were just trying to kill the clock until the buzzer sounded, and then they were trying to win the game 1-0, which in the modern NHL, I mean, forget even the modern NHL, just like the last 15 years of the NHL, it's really hard to win a game 1-0. And it's even harder to do it, even if you have John Gibson net. It's really hard to do it against the Vegas Golden Knights, who, if nothing else, they're going to pour it on when they're the team that's trying to catch up. They are able to do that.
Yeah, yep, definitely. And, I mean, I want to give the Ducks some credit here, and I don't think this is a good strategy that's going to lead to success. Mm-hmm. But I think at 5-on-5 through the third period, the Ducks had a pretty good defensive zone strategy.
Well, that's the thing, is they actually were pulling it off.
Yes.
I guess maybe I mischaracterized it a little bit. I don't agree with the overall thought process, but they were pulling it off. I mean, Vegas was not getting a whole lot of quality up until the very end.
Yep. Up until they basically had their goalie pulled and had a 6-on-5, and that's kind of the thing here. Is the Ducks did a good job in the neutral zone or defensive zone, keeping things to the outside, making it very much a one and done situation for Vegas, and really trying to kill off the game. The issue is when you're doing that, you're inviting pressure, you're inviting shots against, and even if you're doing a good job of keeping it to the outside, all it takes is one mistake, and if you're allowing more chances against, you're making the opportunity for those mistakes to happen. Basically, you're allowing for more opportunities for those mistakes to happen. And that's the issue here with this strategy, is that you're inviting those chances against. And once Vegas got the extra man, that was when a mistake happened. And that's when Adam Henrique lost his man in the slot.
Pretty badly.
Pretty badly, and Vegas was able to finish that chance, and that ended up tying the game. And so instead of trying to get on the front foot and attacking with some pressure, getting some offensive zone time, potentially going for the second goal as compared to trying to win the game 1-0.
Basically, it did feel like a collective decision to play that way from the start of the third.
Yeah, 100%.
It didn't feel like they ever intended to play it any differently. But again, when we're talking about one game, it is important to also focus a bit on the execution. And they did execute well. I mean, look at it this way. At 5-on-5 in that third period, the Golden Knights had one high-danger opportunity. So that's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty good when you consider score effects. And so I think that the Ducks, if you kind of combine maybe the good stretches of the third, the second in game one, there is some growth in their game. It's not going to be pretty all the time, but there is at least a degree of competence that they're able to achieve now that I don't think that they were capable of last year.
Yeah, I think so also. I think the overarching kind of issue with this team throughout this game wasn't necessarily a defensive zone issue. It was more so chance generation, I think, on the whole for this game. But let's wrap up this. Get into that. Let's wrap up this recap. So the Golden Knights ended up tying it, and the game goes into overtime. And it ended pretty quickly after that.
7 seconds. 7 seconds or less offense is a basketball term, but it looks as though the Golden Knights definitely implemented it here. Off the drop, the Anaheim forwards just kind of thought that the puck was going forward, I guess, and it definitely didn't. It went the other way. Turns into a 2-on-1 for the Golden Knights, goes across the ice to Pacioretty. he's not going to make any mistake from that spot, and that would end the game. So I'm not really going to dissect too much what happened there. It's 3-on-3. It's pretty much a gimmick, as much of a gimmick as the shootout.
Yep.
Of course,
Agreed.
Of course, if you're a Ducks fan, you want to see them execute better in that situation, but it's a fluky endeavor. 3-on-3 is, and I don't have a whole lot to say about that. I just don't.
Yep. I don't really either. Players made mistakes. Goals were scored against by a more highly skilled team.
I mean, that's 3-on-3. You make one mistake, and that could potentially cost you, whether it comes 7 seconds in or whether it's the full the full 4 and whatever minutes. It can still turn in a flash. So
yep, exactly.
Now, before we get into a bit of the roster or just some of how the individual players performed in this game, what did you think of the Vegas Golden Knights golden third jerseys?
They're bad. They're really bad. They remind me of the Nashville mustard jerseys. I don't know if you remember those too intently, but that was, I think, the third jersey in like 06, 07, or maybe 05, 06 was when it was.
The funny thing is, I don't hate the jersey itself necessarily. I just think the uniform looks really lazy.
Because it's their main jersey. It's their main jersey recolored.
Well, I mean, they slapped on their away gloves. They have their home helmet, and they have some new socks. But it just kind of looks a bit. It just looks like, okay, we'll just slap some gold on it, and it'll sell with our fans. It's not great, and especially, I don't know if it's the lighting in their arena, but it doesn't look that golden. But apparently, according to the Vegas beat writers, it's very bright in person, so that's important.
I mean, jerseys do look different in person as compared to on TV.
And when you look at the still images, they do, I think, look a lot better. It's just on TV, it just doesn't come across the same way.
Yeah, and I think that, the Ducks orange jersey is a good example of this. I think on TV it almost looks more red, but in person it looks very much kind of a lighter shade of orange. So maybe it is that situation, but regardless, just from watching the game on TV, it looks like mustard. It does not look like gold. Maybe in person it looks a little bit better, but I actually
blurry with the gold pads in the jersey.
I actually like the fact that they use the white gloves because I like the flashiness of it, but the jerseys are bad.
No, you got to go even further. You got to
go gold
gloves.
That gold, and they need to be the how the gloves used to be more reflective than matte.
On there.
You know how they're more matte now than they are.
Oh yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
You've got to have them be the shiny leather gold.
The tour gloves from back in the day.
Yeah, you got to do that with the gloves for it. They're cowards. They're cowards.
It's a bit. Yeah, they're cowards, clearly. Okay, let's get into some of the lines though, and then we'll do some big picture talk and some questions and emails. Let's do the forwards. You want to start with the forwards?
Yeah.
Let's go net out. Let's switch it up a little bit. I mean, we've already talked about it, but John Gibson was awesome.
Yeah, John Gibson was great. He, I think, was like 0.7 GSAX on the night, and that was with allowing the 2 goals. So picture if he would have somehow maintained the shutout, it would have been, 2.5 or something like that, GSAX. So very, very good night for John Gibson. Showed kind of the form that he had a couple years ago, and if he can continue this form, the Ducks have a chance.
Now, third pairing, Yanni Hakanpää, Jacob Larson. So Larson picking up the assist. I thought that they were much better in this game than in game 1. I mean, the numbers are kind of all over the place with them, but if you look purely at expected goals, 59.23% on the night. I think part of that is driven by maybe the Larson assist, the play where he was on the ice for that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know what the shot probability was, the expected goal was for the Comtois.
I think it was like 0.2 or 0.3.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tap-in in the crease, but still, he was on the ice for that. You got to give him credit. It's one game. And I thought that they looked better overall in this game. Still, there's still going to be some bumps in the road, but it's a step up from what we've seen from him in the past. And I do think that Hakanpää is driving some of that because he definitely looks more sound.
Yep.
When he has the puck than Larson does.
Yep, definitely agree. And I think that this was a much better pairing. One thing I want to mention, I was curious to see if maybe they would look at taking Jacob Larson out after having a very poor first game. They actually ended up calling up Andy Welinski off the taxi squad and putting Cody Karan on the taxi squad. So I was trying to figure out if maybe there was a reason for this, if Welinski would draw in for Hakanpää. Turns out they didn't do it. But One thing I noticed on the broadcast, and I found it interesting, and this is gonna bring in a wrestling trope. So sorry, Felix, but there's something kind of people that will watch WWE say, if you listen hard enough to the commentators, they'll tell you the story before it happens, or they'll tell you what's gonna happen. If they mention something, then maybe that will come back later with a surprise kind of jump in or something like that.
Where is this going?
This is going where I thought the broadcast was very specifically talking about Jacob Larson and saying how this is a big season for him, how he's improved, how he's all this different type of stuff. And the broadcast for the Ducks at times can carry water for the organization. And I think that this was done with the clear intent of trying to raise Jacob Larson's profile a bit with maybe Ducks fans, in the sense of, I think that Larson is going to be in the lineup for majority of the season, is kind of my takeaway from that.
They desperately want him to be what they think he can be.
Correct. And that's kind of where I'm going with this, is that I feel like the broadcast crew really putting that out there is a result of that.
They're trying to speak it into existence.
Exactly.
And so, that is always what you want.
Yeah. We've got a couple elite booming shot things in the Twitch chat, so people want to see that Cody Curran elite booming shot.
Once Ben Hutton is going to be able to play, I'm just curious where that's going to go, because
we'll get into that, because I have some wild thoughts that came into my head as we started the show that I had not thought about until we started.
Okay, well let's just work our way up here to the lineup. So Fowler Manson, I mean, this was an awful game for them. I mean, they just some impressively bad numbers. I mean, 8% expected goals for percentage. Love to see that. 27.27 shot attempt percentage. They were on the ice for 9 shot attempts for and 24 against, which is a lot. And they just didn't do anything well. And Fowler, I mean, this goes back to game 1 a little bit, game 2. This was in game 2. Sorry, they're kind of blending together. But on the power play, just some mind-boggling decisions. Shooting the puck into the pads of the penalty killers, and then missed assignments, some botched pinches that are leading to on-man rushes for the Golden Knights. He looks extremely shaky. He's definitely not looking like 2019-20 Fowler.
No,
or like 2018-19 Fowler. And then Manson, I mean, we talked about it already in game 1, but they just don't look in sync at all, but either as a pairing or individually. And that's troubling. Now, I will say, and of course, feel free to add your own thoughts here, but I am still willing to give this a bit of time, because they are, in theory, 2 quality NHL defensemen. And if given the opportunity, I think that they can work it out. I just think that their play styles are so frenetic that they're just going to have to figure out how to kind of bounce off each other. And they're just not there yet, clearly. Now, how much patience do the Ducks have in allowing that to happen? Well, that's a different story.
Yeah, and I think that I agree completely. I think that you need to give it a little bit more time. I think 2 games, especially against Vegas, is not enough. I think you need to give them, I would say, the 2 games against Minnesota at least. See how they perform against the Wild.
If they can't look good there, then I think that's when if they can't even look respectable there, let's forget good, just okay. Then that's where you have to start asking questions, because after that you play Colorado.
Yeah, exactly. Because they were god-awful. And here's
put up an 8-burger on St. Louis.
Well, and here's the issue, is that you would want Cam Fowler to be the guy that would potentially match up against Nathan MacKinnon, because he's probably the only guy on the Ducks defense that can potentially keep up with Nathan MacKinnon if he gets it into open ice. Now, keep up is the key word. I don't think he can really outskate him, but he can potentially stay with him at least. And so I think that you got to figure out what you have there, and I think you need to give it a couple more games to see. But we've talked about it. This is a short season. If the Ducks are truly in win-now mode,
got to be ruthless.
If they're truly in win-now mode, you need to be able to make your decisions and make changes to them quickly to get wins. And that was honestly my biggest confusion going into this game, was the fact that we didn't see any changes. The fact that the Ducks lost 5-2, and now granted they had some positives, but there were absolutely no changes to the lineup.
I could have told you that was coming, because when I first after game 1, I was thinking, there's got to be changes. That's already looking bad. But then I rewatched some of the shifts, like for Lundestrum, for example, and there was nothing so egregiously bad that
True.
would lead you to make a change. And so for NHL coaches, I just think that they will not make changes unless things are clearly not working or things are just going
True.
horrendously bad. And they also have the built-in excuse of, hey, it's been so long,
Yeah.
we need to give it time, which is not completely
No,
unreasonable.
not at
You
all.
know, if you believe in a combination, you want to see it through to some degree, right? I mean, it's still not these are still not some of the combinations I would have, but give it
Yeah.
an honest go, I guess
Yeah.
is what I'm trying to say here. So for Manson, Fowler, I think they fall more into that category. I still think there's enough potential there,
Well,
but the
and
problem is that they didn't give any confidence in
yeah.
those first.
Yeah, and I think Fowler. I mean, we saw Fowler last year. Fowler was the Ducks' best defenseman last year, and
Yep.
I don't think that's really even that controversial of a statement that he was that good for them last year. He made everyone he played with better, and so I'm willing to give him a little bit more leeway here to try to be able to bounce back from this poor performance. But it can't be too long, and it may just be a situation where for whatever reason, his game and Manson's game just don't work together. They don't mesh together, whether it's Manson having fallen off too much, a bunch of different things. But 2 seasons ago, they tried to force this deep pair to happen, and it just didn't work. And
Yeah, we'll see.
this might be that.
We'll see. Wait and see on that one. I know that there's already people that are screaming from the mountaintop to have Manson traded already, but let's give that some time. I'll give it a few more games before drawing some conclusions. Now, one thing that I think we can already confidently say, just because of the degree of difficulty with the matchup, Kevin Chattenkirk and Hampus Lindholm,
Very good.
pretty damn good. I mean, eye test, they look solid. Kevin Chattenkirk, again, he's not the most athletic player. He's not the fastest skater. He's not the most physical, but his brain is at a very high level.
Good.
And he's a very slick passer. He's got good hands. And that just seems to go perfectly with Hampus Lindholm's kind of steady game. Hampus Lindholm looks rejuvenated, I think, just from a skating perspective. He's been chasing guys down, bodying guys off the puck, and their numbers really reflect that. I mean, shot attempts, not dominant in this game, 52.63%, so +2 on the night, just in raw totals, but then expected goals, so just shot quality, 60% of the expected goals when they were on the ice. High event, but still, just those two, we kind of already figured that they were going to be good together, but there were some questions about how Hampus Lindholm was going to fare because he did have a bit of a down year last year, and maybe it turns out that he wasn't the problem on that pairing.
Maybe.
Who knows?
It's possible. But yeah, this pairing was so good. The thing with Kevin Chattenkirk, to key in on him slightly, seeing as he is the newest addition.
Yeah, it's funny how he's kind of flown under the radar a bit.
But he was so good. And I think a couple of the plays that he made that really stood out to me were, there's a couple of really smart plays where, for instance, there was one where he was below the goal line. And I believe I mentioned this when we did our live watch along of this for Patreon. But he really just holds on to the puck for a split second and lets the guy go past him. And it's such a smart and little play, and one that won't make a highlight reel, but allowed him to break out the zone clean with possession with a pass right afterwards. And it's those types of plays that are such small little plays, but make such a big difference. And that was what impressed me the most, was his ability to break out the puck. And the other thing was his ability to pinch at the right time. And it doesn't seem like he really gets caught that much with his pinches. And I don't know if maybe it's just because he's more mature with his game than he was potentially maybe in New York. But it just seems like he knows when the right time is to jump up into the play. And it seems like overall in the power play, he's just going to be such a steadying presence to able to generate chances for this power play.
The Ducks got maybe, 4 power plays over the 2 games, 3 or 4?
Yeah, not much.
Nothing really stood out, to be honest with you. They didn't look great because, especially in, I think, Game 2, they gave up chances when they were on the power play. But when Shattenkirk did get touches, you can just tell that he knows what he's doing out there. And we talked about this over the offseason, but that is just such a big upgrade for the Ducks on the back end. They just haven't had that, a true kind of puck-moving defenseman. I know that Fowler does that, and I know that there's people who will say, well, look at all his micro stats and how good he is at moving the puck. But Kevin Chattenkirk does that, and it bears out in the kind of macro level numbers. And I think that he just kind of does it all, and it's good to see. And he has the kind of game where also you wonder, hey, even though he's getting a little bit up there in age, it seems like maybe he'll age a little more gracefully because this game isn't really predicated on any kind of high-end skating or physicality.
Yeah, it really seems like his game is kind of more so based on positioning now and timing, and that's something that can really stay with you later into his career. So, really good to see. I mean, he's basically as good as advertised, maybe even better, to be honest.
Oh yeah,
I believe it was Dom Lucian or Lucian, however you pronounce his last name.
loose chicken.
Yeah, loose chicken, however you want to say it. That in the article for The Athletic basically said he was the closest thing to an elite level defenseman or is an elite level defenseman. And a lot of people kind of push back saying, what? That doesn't make any sense, especially kind of it's the shine
with the Ducks.
It's the shine from Tampa and all this stuff. And you look at how he played. I see why his model believes that. He is very good.
He's a good eye test player and he's a good numbers player.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of guys you love to watch. Okay.
Exactly.
Let's get into the forwards. Let's just go 4 through 1. Let's just start with the fourth line. I mean, they played the most at 5-on-5 of any line. Maybe part of that was just because Dallas Eakins had them out there, defending the lead and maybe saw them as the most fit to do that. They had okay numbers. I mean, shot attempt percentage.
Very low
great,
event. Very low event.
But yeah, there's just not a lot happens when they're out there. Hey, Nick Delorier still getting his scoring chances once again. But this line, even though, this is the thing with this line. I think that they're fine in what they do. They are a fine fourth line. But for whatever reason, the coaching staff is just featuring them in a way that they are not suited for. That is not optimal for this roster.
They played the most minutes out of any forward line in this game, and I would assume if you want to try to...
Maybe that's part of the reason why the Ducks didn't generate a ton of offense in the third period.
Yeah, if you want to try to figure out why, I bet it's because Dallas Eakins, I think, views this line as his quote-unquote shutdown line.
100%. Who else would he view as a shutdown line?
Which is why they got the most minutes, and I bet if you looked at a shift chart, that a lot of those shifts where they got those extra minutes came in that third period. And to me, it's baffling. I don't get it fully. I mean, they were fine in this game, no doubt. I think they were better in this game. It was super low event, which is kind of what you want when you're trying to kill off a game. But it's just, I don't get it. I don't get why this line's playing as much as they are. Yes, their expected goals numbers are solid right now, as you'll see, but... And credit to them. If that continues, then maybe they should be getting a bit more ice time. But they're still a fourth line, and they're not gonna be able to generate chances like other lines. So if you're trying to win a game, basically you play them the most minutes if you're trying to not lose a game. If you're trying to win a game, you don't play them the most minutes, and I think that's a key distinction here. And I hope they continue the solid play. But we just have a big sample size right now that shows that they're not this line that we've seen. And what we have right now so far this season is 2 games, and it's small sample size.
Well, look at it this way. This is the only line that is returning from last season. This is the only known commodity that Dallas Eakins has. And I think he's viewing it partially as, for now, I'm going to lean into this line until I know what I have in the 3 other lines, which you can definitely object to that logic, but that might be the explanation.
The weird thing is realistically, you would think that Jakob Silfverberg would be playing the most minutes when you're trying to kill off a game. He's considered to be the steady force.
For example, you could have Silfverberg with Grant and Delorier. I mean, you could upgrade the shutdown line, right? I mean, all due respect to Carter Rowney, there I go again with the all due respect, but get Silfverberg on there. He's known to be in that role. He can do that. So confusing. We'll see if this trend holds up. I'm open to the possibility that this is kind of a short-term thing until the other lines kind of crystallize a bit, because they're still in their maiden voyage. Okay, let's move on up here. Line 3, quote unquote line 3. Danton Heinen, Ryan Getzlaf, Isaac Lundestrum. Now maybe that's line 2 for some. I'll just call them line 3 based on their performances. What did you think of these 3 in game 2?
I thought it was a little bit more of the same of the first game.
More of the same.
More of the same. Isaac Lundestrom still looked a little bit lost out there.
He really is kind of like an island out there. When the puck goes to him, you're not going to see it again.
Yeah, I mean, Getzlaf had one really, really good chance off a turnover that didn't end up going in the back of the net, but that was really kind of it for this line as a whole.
I thought Heinen looked okay.
He looked okay.
Once again, I believe in the combination of Getzlaf Heinen, but Getzlaf's playmaking chops and his offensive abilities are just really
wasted.
They're going to waste right now, and the Ducks, they don't have that. They don't have offensive talent in spades. So they should be looking to maximize what they do have. And I just think Lundestrum, it's gonna bear out on its own. I think that maybe it'll take another game, another 2 games, another 3, but I just don't see Dallas Aikens sticking with this combination because he's not getting anything out of it right
Especially
now.
when you have a ready-made option in Sonny Milano to be able to jump in there.
Well, that's the thing, exactly, is that he has something that he can go back to. Now, to their credit, if you just look at their numbers, they, from a scoring chance perspective, outchance the opposition 8-3. Expected goals perspective, 60% controlled when they were on the ice. So they're not sinking the team. It's not so much about that. It's just that the opportunity cost of having them together, you're leaving value on the table.
Here's where looking at the raw expected goals numbers, I think, comes into play a bit more. In terms of expected goals for, they generated 0.17.
Which was second least.
Second least. For instance, the Sam Steele line in this game contributed 0.32. So 0.17 expected goals is pretty much nothing. I mean, for instance, to go back, that Max Comtois...
And probably a lot of that came from the Getzlaf shot.
Yes, exactly. And so, for instance, the Max Comtois goal had about a 0.2, 0.3 expected goal. So that one chance alone from Comtois generated more expected goals for the team. Basically, what all expected goals is, just for anyone new listening that don't understand, what that means is basically there's a percentage based upon the historical shooting percentage of where the shots come from. And so if a shot comes from this specific location and potentially any other qualifiers that they can add in before that, they can look at, say, this shot has a 20% chance of going in regardless of shooter or goaltending talent. And so if it has a 20% chance of going in, that's a 0.2 expected goal total. And you kind of tally that all up because realistically overall, you should, if you end up with 1.0 expected goals, you should realistically have a goal by then. And so with that being said, out of all the chances that the Getzlaf line had, there was a 17% chance cumulatively of a shot going in from that line as compared to a 32% chance from the Steele line. So not a lot.
32% is pretty good odds.
Yeah, 17, not a lot. And to be honest, I mean, to compare briefly to Vegas, the top Vegas line had 0.68 expected goals for. So... a really good total is above 0.5 for a line.
And that's the thing with that line, and why I don't think that we're going to see them broken up right away is because they're not killing this team. And NHL coaches will almost always play it safe. And until that line proves to either be a liability or something else goes wrong, they are probably going to leave them together. Now, maybe we see Milano get inserted there as soon as by the time we're listening tonight, Monday night, but I don't know. I think that they get a little bit more run. I'm already personally ready to call it quits on that experiment. I just don't see anything out of Isaac Lundestrum. I don't think they have time to let him develop on the fly. I think that he actually would benefit from playing in the AHL again. I just think that his game is clearly a bit of a step behind for the NHL level. Okay, let's talk about the veteran line before we get to the kid line because, I think one will be a bit more enjoyable than the other. Who knows? Raquel Henrique Silverberg, what did you think of that line?
Raquel had one really good chance, and outside of that, it was pretty much more...
Silverberg, a couple good looks, I would
say.
But
it was more of the same from the first game. They were better, I think, noticeably so. And that shows when you're looking kind of at expected goals with 0.14s compared to 0.07. But still, 0.14 is the lowest amount for the team.
They were also bad defensively.
Yes, exactly. So... It's yet another rough game. I still will add the qualifier that they were matched up against Mark Stone and Alex Pietrangelo for the majority of their minutes, but you need to see more from them.
Well, I kind of view them a bit, almost exactly how I view Manson Fowler, where I think give that a bit more time. I think on most nights they will be a plus line, a positive value line. You could argue already maybe that you should disperse some of them throughout the lineup as opposed to having all your eggs in one basket. But for now, I think that there's still plenty of time for them to get that together. And they have shown in the past that they can make it work. So, I don't know. I mean, where do you stand on that?
I think you give them a little bit more time, but I think if it's not working, I think you definitely need to look at dispersing talent throughout the lineup a little bit more. Yeah,
for example, Silverberg would look great right now, I think, next to Getzlaf and Heinen, because he just adds more of that ability to chase pucks. Yep. He is a willing shooter, and I think gives a competent guy for Getzlaf.
And I think that allows Heinen to play on his natural left side because he's a left-handed shot as compared to playing on the right side. I don't know if that's something for Heinen that he'd prefer to play the left side, but that allows that to happen. And so I think that they deserve a couple more games, and we'll get into that in a bit when looking ahead at the matchup against the Minnesota Wild, with that being so important. I think that you give them that series. But I think outside of that, I think if they don't perform well, I think you got to look at switching things up.
Well, another possibility is you could go Raquel with Getzlaf and Raquel, Getzlaf, Milano, for example, and just kind of have like an all offense line. And then you put Heinen with Henrique and Silverberg, and that kind of becomes your shutdown line a little bit. So I think that's something that I would consider. Maybe more of a situational look. Now, okay, let's end this game, wrap up on a good note. I would say again, although the numbers again are not great for this line, but Max Comtois, Sam Steele, and Troy Terry, more of the same. I mean, when they're on the ice, good things tend to happen in the offensive zone. They generated the most expected goals of any trio for the Ducks. Once again, Sam Steele making things happen with the puck.
Looking
Troy Terry.
Good.
Max Comtois, I thought, was not quite as good in this game, but he got a goal, which matters quite a bit. But defensively, he had some lapses. Offensively, I thought that he was good at keeping the chains moving. So overall, that line, I think it's a line that I would imagine that Aikens will start to give more ice time to, right? I mean, they're the most productive by a lot.
I don't know. I mean, here's the issue. There is he realistically should have been giving them more ice time in both of these games, and yet they ended up playing the least amount of ice time in game 2. They did not have them.
They got to earn it, Jake. That's the thing.
They
got to earn it.
But that's my point.
Counting goals doesn't actually earn it.
Yeah. So
goal doesn't earn.
But that's my point. Is realistically, Dallas Aikens should have been playing them more, and I'm not quite sure what more they have to do to be able to earn ice time outside of score goals, generate chances, be the most noticeable line for the Ducks. Now, granted, I think if you're employing the strategy that the Ducks employed of trying to kill off a game, they also are allowing the most chances against. So maybe that was part of the reason why they played
defensively. I don't think.
Yeah,
which is a fair reason not to put them out in those situations.
But I would also argue that in the third period of a game where you're winning 1-0, put them out there to maybe get that second goal to be able to put ice on the game and really finish the game off and not have to worry about defending the entire time. If you get that second goal, it becomes a much easier game. And so maybe stop worrying so much about really sitting back and playing a tight defensive structure and allow them to go out there and potentially get the goal. Maybe it burns you, sure, but at least you're allowing these players to be able to play their way. And now, granted, Dallas Aikens may come out and come back at me if I were to say that to him and say, hey, we're not in the business of getting these guys experience right now. We're in the business of winning. And while, sure, that's not as for sure of a win. There is the give and take, the risk reward of putting those guys out. It's a much lower risk proposition to sit back on a 1-0 lead than go for the second goal.
Exactly, and that's the thing that I guess we should maybe put out, especially for some people that are maybe newer listeners who aren't as accustomed to our tone and our tenor here, is that it is of course easier for us to sit back and say all this after it's happened, and we're not the ones that are calling the shots in game. And yeah, it's harder to accept that emotionally in the moment because it's stressful. Your job is on the line. There are other jobs on the line. Like, there's a lot at stake here for Dallas Aikens. And so it's understandable to play it safe, or at least what you perceive to be safe. But as we're kind of seeing already, that doesn't necessarily, it doesn't translate. It hasn't translated so far, and that to wins. And so they're going to have to adjust that at some point. I do think that right now this is the Ducks' best line, just offensively at least. I mean, I don't think it's close, right?
Yeah, I completely agree.
I mean, they generate the most quality looks, and they also are able to do it the most consistently. It's only 2 games, but they have looked really good. And it's been cut and paste to what we've been saying for months, is that Troy Terry, he's a guy who is not going to necessarily shine, or he's not going to become like an all-star level player, but he just keeps the chains moving. He gets that puck, gets it up ice, gets it to his line mates, gets it to them in higher leverage areas. He had a couple really good scoring opportunities as well in the series overall. Sam Steele is turning into, just a different player before our eyes. And Max Comtois, still some warts in his game, but I just think that he has that scoring touch. I mean, it's undeniable at this point. And if you can just surround him like they have so far, you're going to be able to get the most out of his gifts. And once kind of his entire game is up to speed, then you're just looking at a really good line. And that to me is the most exciting thing if you're a Ducks fan right now out of these two games is that line.
I think
that bodes well for the future.
I think that line, well, specifically one play I want to mention is on the power play. Troy Terry had a really nice pass to bring Sam Steele in for basically a clean look against Fleury, and Fleury just made a really nice poke check on Sam Steele. Yeah. But the exciting thing for Ducks fans is, now I'm not trying to sell that line too high, which is why I'm putting it like this. That line has the potential to become a second line for this Ducks team for a long time. If the first line ends up being a Trevor Zegras along with someone else.
A steady second line, yeah.
A steady second line that can put up anywhere between 40 to 60 points, which is important to have players that can put up points in those range. A guy like an Adam Henrique comes to mind.
I think it would be pretty cool if they ended up being kind of like a mainstay line for a number of years.
Yeah.
Because that's the goal of any franchise, right? Is to have your drafted homegrown players become your relied upon guys. So, look, this is already an upgrade because we were not as high on them collectively over the offseason, and they have already kind of, I don't want to say proven us wrong. There's still there's still 54 games left to be played, but what they were able to do against a very good Vegas team, I think that kind of upgrades what they did, despite the smaller sample.
Yep, definitely. So, want to hit some big picture type items from these two games. What are your big picture takeaways?
Oh, boy. Wow, that is a loaded question.
Yep.
Big picture takeaways, it's going to be a tough fight for this team to make the playoffs. I think that they are really struggling to generate offense,
yep,
line to line, and I think that some of that is self-inflicted. And I guess this extends to another point is I think that the Isaac Lundestrum experiment has to be called off immediately. I know it sounds harsh. I know maybe it might seem like it's too quick of judgment, but I already had a bad gut feeling about it. And to be honest, it's not just that those two games did nothing to abate that thought. It's that these two games reinforced it. It's not just a confirmation bias. Lundestrum did nothing out there. And Ryan Getzlaf is still making great passes. He's still making things happen. So you can't put that to waste. They need to call that off. I think it's just going to be hard for this team to generate offense. They have some ways to get there. Get Sonny Milano in the lineup. Maybe call up Trevor Zegras at some point. Maybe shuffle your lines around a little bit. But outside of that, I think that they have the elements that we kind of were expecting. Their defense, despite the shakiness of the second pairing, maybe that's offset a little bit shockingly by the third pairing, has been almost as advertised because of how good the first pairing has been. And John Gibson, I think, redeemed himself quite a bit in game two. Now, haven't really seen much of the power play, so can't really say too much on that, to be honest. But so far, this team is kind of who we thought they were. I don't think that anything has really stood out that dramatically to me that wildly changes my calculation outside of maybe the Steele line just looking so good.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest takeaway from the two-game series, there's a couple things, actually. I actually put out an article with a bunch of them. But the bigger ones are chance generation. I think that is a big issue for this team. While you could look back on Game 2, for instance, and you can think about the Ricard Raquel chance in tight, the Sam Steele chance in tight, the Getzlaf chance, basically a clean look on Fleury and how Fleury was able to make the save. And while, yes, you can think about these glorious chances that weren't scored, I think the issue is there were not that many on top of that. And so when you look at an expected goal total for the Ducks are sitting, in terms of expected goals for per 60, sixth worst in the NHL so far in the early part of the season at 1.58 expected goals for per game, essentially. And that's just not good enough. And you look at kind of where the playoff teams were last year, they were all in that 2.5 range, generating that many chances. And now, granted, I think a key thing here is they're playing Vegas. We've said this really good defensive team. And so I think that is a qualifier here that a lot of teams are going to struggle to get points out of Vegas. They're going to struggle to get points there.
Vegas is kind of it's already a well-oiled machine.
Yes.
So
And
you can't just come in. Yeah, exactly. Like
so majority of the teams, especially the ones that the Ducks are going to be fighting for a playoff spot for, if they do indeed continue to push that direction, the Minnesota Wild, the Arizona Coyotes, the San Jose Sharks of the world, they're going to struggle to get points out of Vegas. So getting 1 point out of a possible 4 isn't a death sentence for this team, but they're going to need to make some improvements moving forward to be able to do that. And one of those, like you said, take Isaac Lundestrum, put in Sonny Milano, put on a Trevor Zegras. I mean,
you need higher, I guess, upside guys offensively. You need to have a guy who just on any given night could put a couple like a Max Comtois.
Especially
more guys like that.
Especially if the Ryan Getzlaf line is potentially going to get soft matchups. Why have a safe player there? Get them some softer matchups. The Steele Comtois-Terry line is going well. And so get someone there that can create some chances, create some offense, whether that is Sonny Milano, whether that is Trevor Zegras. I mean, who knows what's going to happen with the AHL preseason schedule? Because the Goals are slated to play more games, but both their games got canceled so far. So who knows where that's going? So if your reasoning and logic for postponed, sorry. If your reasoning and logic for sending down Zegras was to get him into AHL preseason games to kind of prove himself in those and maybe come up before the AHL season even starts, well, those games aren't happening. So maybe just take a look. Who cares? Send down Vinny Lettieri. Was he ever going to really crack the lineup? Like these are the types of questions. Put him on the taxi squad. Get him in a game potentially. Maybe try to do it against the Minnesota Wild or the Arizona Coyotes if you can. Do it in that fashion against those teams that aren't the top of the top. Because after Minnesota, the Ducks play Colorado and then St. Louis, and then they get Arizona, or it might be Arizona after Colorado. It's a very tough.
It's Arizona. Yeah.
It's Arizona. And so maybe try to get them into those games. So I think there's a way and there's a solution, but they need to be able to be willing to make that change there. The key thing here is jumping into the next series. The series against Minnesota, with the first game being, if you're listening to this on Monday tonight, this is a very critical series for the Ducks and their fight for the playoffs. The Minnesota Wild just picked up 4 points off the LA Kings in dramatic fashion. They could have lost. They could have lost both games. They were on the back of budding superstar Kirill Kaprizov, who's going to be a star in this league. And the Ducks are going, if they are competing for a playoff spot, they're going to be fighting with this Wild team. And if you cannot win one of these games and you lose both of these straight, that is an 8-point swing. Because not only are you not picking up 2 points, the team you are directly competing with is picking up 2. And now, granted, they're going to be playing the Wild, 6 more times? It's every team 8 times.
It does balance out a bit. You're putting yourself way behind the 8 ball.
Exactly. So these next 2 games are going to be very critical, and that's why I say, sure, leave Raquel Silverberg and Henrique together. Leave Manson and Fowler together for this series. But if things go awry, you're in a really, really tough shape, especially with the fact that you're going to be playing Colorado and St. Louis in short order after that, which are going to be no cakewalks at all, and they're going to be really tough matchups. The Ducks, realistically, there's a chance they could go 0-9-1 in this stretch and be out of it.
We've been joking around about that.
But they could be out of it by the 10-game stretch. And so that is why getting out to the right foot against the Wild is so important here, because the Ducks do have such a tough schedule to open the season.
Well, and plus, right now, after 4 games, it's the equivalent of 6 games in an 82-game schedule.
Yeah.
So it's not. It seems like it's nothing, right? I'm getting just trauma just from hearing from the people all tell me in my mentions that it's just a game or 2 games, but it's not the same as it is every year. And yeah, the Wild are not there's just no. The only team right now that you can say the Ducks have that they should win is the Coyotes, but they don't get to play them until they get through this Wild team and then the Avalanche, who are rolling. So
yeah.
It's gonna be critical.
It's tough sledding. So let me throw this out there at a change that we might want to see, or that I might want to see. I
think I already said mine. So
what was yours?
Well, I mean, Lundestrum.
Okay, yeah. Outside of that, though, not necessarily for the Wild series, but if things go awry in the Wild series.
Oh, okay.
Where I'm thinking things go is with Ben Hutton, and I'm not really quite sure when he's going to be available for the team, because he may be out of quarantine and so he may need to get up to speed. There's a lot of things. There are a lot of moving pieces that I'm not really quite sure on when he's going to actually be available.
He could play Monday night. He could play. I mean, who knows? Yeah.
But if things go south for that for the Fowler Manson pair, what if you try? I don't think Ben Hutton has played a lot on his off wing, but I believe he's done it from time to time. What if you look at playing Hutton with Fowler, and then you have Manson with Larson, I guess?
Yeah, or Hutton Manson, and then
Fowler Hockenpah?
Yeah. Well, I do like the idea of Hutton Fowler, because Hutton is a good defender, or a good defensive defenseman. And, he's capable of denying entries and kind of being, holding up his end of the bargain defensively. And we have seen Fowler do okay with guys like that, like an Erica Branson type, who just kind of stay home. And Hutton, I think, is a decent skater as well. So, yeah, I don't hate that at all. And I mean, that's definitely a bolder move, and not one that I'm 100% sure they'll make. But I
agree.
think it's not crazy. I mean, I could still see them doing it, because Hutton does kind of have that name brand recognition to some degree. I mean, at least in NHL circles. So I think that's definitely a good suggestion. My other suggestion. Let's see. What do I have? Or did you have any others?
Well, the reason why I would want to do that is, I think, because some people may say the easier thing to do is switch up and go Fowler, Shattenkirk, Lindholm Manson. Lindholm Manson have worked together in the past. I don't think I would want to split up Lindholm Shattenkirk at this point.
They're just too good.
The returns on that pairing so far are way too good, and they provide the Ducks such a steady presence. It is insane when you look at their shot metrics and everything along those lines from the first two games, and how night and day it is between when they're on the ice and when they're not. It's like the Ducks are a different team when you have Lindholm and Shattenkirk on the ice, because they control play that well.
You need those two together. So, yeah, I think that's probably the one card you have to play. I mean, of course, we can't forget the booming, accurate shot of Cody Curran, who could come in and change everything. Of course. There's also, I mean, I know that Andy Welinski is on this roster right now. I don't know if you even consider giving him a look, because I think Hockenpah's been okay. It's funny, even though I'm not high on Larson at all, and I think he's had moments where he's looked lost out there, that on balance, that third pairing hasn't been the issue for this team so far.
It's been better than it was last year when it was Larson Holzer.
I'm kind of just leaving that alone for now. I can, of course, hear people saying, well, what about Josh Mahura, or what about Hunter Drew or Simon Benoit? They're going to be in the AHL. Just close the chapter on that, because it's not happening for now. Offensively, again, this is, to me, what I was saying earlier, is the biggest problem area for the Ducks. And I do think that if things just go completely awry in the next two games, you have to break up the Henrique line. I think that you potentially move Henrique to the wing. I mean, you got to do something to just really change the look of that forward group. I mean, I personally would get David Backes in there.
Yep, that's another card they haven't played that could be an option for this team. And I mean, to be honest, some people may not think David Backes would be the best option for this team, but I mean, he makes the team better. Like, even though, yes,
he does.
Even though he's not worth his cap hit, his on-ice play actually improves this Ducks team fairly significantly.
I will say this. If the Ducks have two more bad offensive performances, they're not even bad, just lackluster. Clearly, it's just not optimal. If I'm in charge, and what I would be calling for, even if I'm not in charge, of course I'm not, but what's the excuse to not have Trevor Zegras on the team at that point?
The excuse to not have, yeah.
Even though I understand he's experienced, blah, 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 desperate times call for desperate measures. Get him in there.
Yeah.
Just give him a shot. So, I mean, that's definitely something that they just have to circle back to at some point.
Yeah, and I think especially when you're looking at this roster, and the guys running, like, Bob Murray's not dumb. I think, let's be clear here, and I don't think Dallas Eakins is dumb. I think they're both smart enough guys where they can recognize, hey, an issue for this team is that we cannot generate chances. We're not getting enough good chances. And there's a ready-made option in Trevor Zegras. Now, they may view it as he's not ready, all this different type of stuff, different things like that. And
How do
but
you know he's not ready if he hasn't even played?
exactly. And so I think I would hope that both of them are smart enough to recognize this issue and that you have this really dynamic offensive talent and might as well throw him in a game. Like I said, this is a season that we will never ever see again. We will never ever see the ability to do this with your roster ever again. We're never going to see taxi squads. We're never going to see CHL guys in the AHL. We're never going to see any of this ever again. So why not use that flexibility, use that kind of weird season to get guys experienced in a way that you typically wouldn't. I think the Ducks are doing themselves a bit of a disservice here. Now this is a bit of a transition from other things, but a bit of a disservice when you look at Dallas Aiken's quotes that Trevor Zegras needs to go to the AHL. If you look at guys before him, Sam Steele, Troy Terry, Hampus Lindholm, all of these guys, they've spent time in the AHL.
He's not of that ilk.
But
he's a top 10 pick.
Even if you think that, the this is not the same season as those seasons. This is not an equivalency. You're comparing apples to oranges with that. This is a year where you have a taxi squad, where you can have them on the roster in practice, where you can get them into games, where you can really utilize the flexibility that you've gathered by the weirdness of this season. And the AHL isn't playing until February. So why not give them some games before that?
Well, here's what I would guess. If they are going to bring him on at all, and if it's at all going to happen in the near future, I think they wait until the Coyotes series.
Probably.
I can't imagine them bringing him in for the Avalanche. I don't even know if I would do that, to be honest with you. I
will be very curious to see what they do with the fact that they're playing the Wild tomorrow.
I mean, even though the Wild look good, this is probably when you try stuff.
Yep.
I mean, and plus, like, I know that they have the excuse of, well, it was Vegas. What can you expect? 10-month layoff, blah, blah, blah. But what I am expecting, and of course we're going to be possibly proven wrong in less than, 12. I mean, it's not going to take long for us to be possibly proven wrong, but I could see them just running it back again one more time, right? 3-strike rule. And then we see changes on Wednesday. The Ducks have 4 games this week.
Yeah, we should
4-7.
Yeah, before we record our next game, they're going to be playing the Wild on Monday and Wednesday, and then play the Avalanche on Friday and Sunday. Which means next Sunday's show will be a bit of a throwback for us. It's going to be a post game episode next Sunday, so that's going to be fun. Yep. Four games to recap. We'll probably we'll probably not go in depth as we did in this on each game. We'll probably more so do a series.
This is our first episode since March of 2020 where we have games to talk about. So yeah, we're gonna go super in depth. It's a longer show. I'm completely happy to do it because, we want to get you guys all the content that we possibly can. Should we get into some questions now, or unless you had some lingering thoughts?
Let's just do this. Predict the outcomes of these games. Predict the Ducks' record for these upcoming 4 games. Because I like to torture you.
You know what I think.
What?
Now, am I willing to air that? I think they go 1, 2, and 1.
Yeah, that's what I think also. I think they go 1-0-1 against the Wild and then lose both against the Avalanche.
Yeah, the Avalanche just embarrassed the Blues, and presumably the Blues are better than the Ducks. So transitive property there. I just don't know how they pull one out. Hockey is a weird sport. Maybe they win one against the Wild, then lose another one, and then just somehow claw out a point against the Avs just because of the weirdness of the sport and John Gibson just being superhuman. But yeah, 1, 2, and 1 would be what I would expect this week.
Yep, I agree with that.
Which, by the way, if you come out of this with 3 points 3 out of 8 points?
3 out of 8.
3
out of 8 with 2.
Does that keep you alive?
Yes, because like we said with the Golden Knights, a lot of teams are going to lose points to the Avalanche. I think this is a weird year where it's
loss to the Avalanche counts less.
You are only competing against the 8 teams in your division. There's no cross division play for playoff spots. So as long as Vegas takes care of their business basically against the lower teams in the division, same thing with Colorado, losing to those teams is not a game changer for you. It's not this 4-point swing each game. Now, the Wild, the Coyotes, if we're kind of looking at the rest of the month, those are the key games. You got to be able to pick up points.
I would even argue the Blues, but yeah, I think that the Ducks, they just need points against the Wild. They need more than 2 points.
Yes, I agree.
So you don't need to win both, but you got to get, I would say, 3 points. And then against the Avs, you're just kind of hoping. I mean, the Avs just look really good.
They look very good.
You could quibble with how good they look uniform-wise, the blue pants and blue gloves, blue helmets. But
big fan.
Okay.
All right, so let's get into some questions. So people in Twitch chat, if you have questions, throw them in. Add question at the front of it just for me to be able to identify easily. But we got this one in an email form, so let's hit this one quick. And we'll get to one from Twitter also, then we'll get to Twitch. But this came from Caleb Halley. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. But he had a couple questions for us. Do you think the kid line, do you like the kid line, Terry, Steele, Comtois? Would it be better if you put Max Jones there? And then also, why do we keep seeing Larson in the lineup when it seems like he's on the ice for every scoring highlight against the Ducks? What could we get for him?
I don't think you're getting much of anything for Larson right now. A lower draft pick.
Yeah, and I think for the kid line, I think we've kind of gone over that we like it. I would not throw Max Jones there over Comtois. I think Comtois has a scoring talent that Jones does not.
Jones just doesn't really add much that line already doesn't have. That they don't already have. He's, I guess, okay two-way, but Steele has been that and more. Terry's definitely that. So you need some scoring punch, and he doesn't really have that, whereas Comtois does. Yep. So I'm not touching that line right now.
And then Peter Witherow on Twitter said, if you were Eakins, what adjustments would you make, lineups or strategy, or would you let things play out a little longer? How many games until you call up Zegras, and how many games until Murray calls out the core or kids?
Wait, can you repeat that question one more time?
So let's start with the first part. If Eakins if you were Eakins, what adjustments would you make, lineup or strategy, or would you let things play out a little bit longer?
There are some things that we already talked about where I am already pulling the plug on them. So like the Lundestrum line, for example, you already have to make a move on that. It's just, there's no previous history to fall back on with that one where you can say you can give it time, right? That's, to me, is kind of one of the biggest arguments against it. Whereas with Fowler Manson, which hasn't really worked, Henrique, Raquel, Silverberg, which hasn't really worked, there's at least a track record there where I'm giving that a bit more time. And then I would remove Derek Grant from the power play.
Yes, that I would agree with that. How many games?
It's just an eyesore.
How many games until you call up Zegras?
0. I'm calling him up now.
Yeah,
I'm sending him a text or a DM, whatever, and I'm filing it with the league. Like he's on the team. I mean for me.
And it's not hard. He's in Irvine. He's in the area. So
take a 20-minute drive to Honda Center and lace him up because there's just no reason for him to be in the AHL right now.
Yep. And how many games until Murray calls out the core or kids? I think the core gets called out in a week or two if the results keep trending the way they are.
Well, I mean, you kind of said it, but they haven't been that great.
No.
The core has. So, I mean, and I think that they're capable of better. So it actually, I know that people would groan and grumble about it, but it wouldn't be like this completely out of line call out by Murray.
Yeah, I agree with that, but it's just more of the same. It's the typical Murray play.
It's more of the same if you keep calling out the same people and yet you keep running back the same roster when you don't have to.
Well, also, when you look at it and you say, well, the reason why this line is a top line is because of your roster construction, when in reality that top line should be a second line.
Yes.
And so who does the blame really go to? And so he also said, if the team does poor enough in the first half, does Murray finally start trading off assets, or is he simply too stubborn to admit defeat?
Here's my question with all of that, and this is getting far deeper into the inner workings of this team, but at what point, who takes the controller away from Bob Murray? Who is going to do that? Because he seems to hold so much sway in the organization. Don't forget, he's not just general manager; he's executive vice president, I believe, um,
Mm-hmm.
and he wields a lot of power. And I just don't know at what point who steps in and says, you know what, we just can't trust you to even make those moves, or we're not. It's not even that we don't trust you, but we need to move in a different direction, and we're just putting everything on pause. Or a message comes down from the top that says, hey, you know what, we are moving into a full-on rebuild. We're tearing everything down, and we're basically instructing you to do this, right? So at what point does that happen? Is that the question?
Well, yeah, exactly. If the
At what point?
if the Ducks do poor enough in the first half of the season, does Murray finally start doing that? Does he start trading off
I
assets, or is he too stubborn that he will not do that, and it will cost him his
so
job?
I just don't. I think that if the start is poor enough, and I'm talking horrendous, then I think that's when those dominoes start falling, where he just gets stripped of some of that decision making process, and so
I
then
think.
it depends on who's deciding at that point.
I mean, I think his job's on the line. I
Oh,
really,
it's 100% on the
I
line.
really genuinely believe his job's
I
on the
mean,
line.
this season is a referendum on how he has constructed
Well,
this team.
yeah, because I mean, you look at the roster. The roster is not that much different than the last couple of years. They added Kevin Chattenkirk, but there's not really a distinct difference between this and if his basically calling card is that the kids are developed, and so this is my roster and this is good enough to win. And if they don't, if you oversell yourself on your team, which GMs do all the time, and he's now committed to that to the ownership, at a certain point that needs to fall back to him. Bob Murray, for a long time as the general manager of this franchise, I think has done a good job of putting blame elsewhere and not really. No, but I'm genuinely like honest with
I'm
this.
chuckling because I think you're completely correct there.
And really shirking blame and putting it elsewhere, whether it's Carlisle, whether it's Getzloff, whether it's Perry, whether it's all these things, and never really taking the blame on himself for giving Kessler the deal that he did, for mistakes that he made, and not really.
Don't expect him to come out and take the blame, but it's not something that just doesn't happen in
Well,
leadership roles.
but my point is that he's calling out other guys for almost his own mistakes or not being able to recognize those mistakes. And I think at a certain point that falls back on you as a leader, is if you don't start taking ownership for your own mistakes as a leader, for your own faults as a leader, that eventually starts to fall back on you. And I think that that's one thing with Bob Murray.
I have a question for the show.
Yeah.
If Bob Murray, I mean, of course it's 2 games. I think that this is a bit of an overextension, but it's something that we have to at least be cognizant of because things could go that way. If Bob Murray does get stripped of his decision-making authority, and with the intent of moving on from after the season, do you see a scenario where Dallas Eakins is still around with no Bob Murray? Or is Dallas Eakins, is it a package deal and they both go out the door together?
I think there's a world that we live in where you could have Dallas Eakins without Bob Murray. I think that that's a possibility. I think part of it is due to the fact that Dallas Eakins has another year left on his deal, and maybe
I don't see a scenario with Bob Murray but no Dallas Eakins. I don't think he gets to do another coaching.
He does not. He does not.
Yeah.
I don't think Bob Murray gets to make that firing. I think there is a realistic possibility where if the Ducks get rid of Bob Murray, that they also say goodbye to Dallas Eakins. I mean, someone mentioned it in our Twitch chat, but Gerard Gallant's sitting out there without a job right now.
Well, Gerard Gallant, if you're talking about a win now coach,
yeah,
that's a win now coach.
I mean, he's also a coach that has done he's also done a good job developing some players. I mean, you look at Sasha Barkov, Jonathan Huberdeau, and different players like that over in Florida that he did a good job with. So
even in Montreal as an assistant, I mean, that's the thing, is that he could fill that role both and kind of check all the boxes. And so it sucks because I think we were both kind of at least curious to see what Dallas Eakins could do. So far, he's kind of been dealt a raw hand, and that doesn't help. But even early on, we haven't really seen any indication that he's going to be the one to turn this around. There's still plenty of time for that to happen, but it's just hard to say, where his value add really is.
Yeah. So let's get into some questions from the Twitch chat. So for those of you listening to this on your favorite podcast services or on YouTube, yes, we're on YouTube. Go subscribe to the show there if you'd like. That's one thing that we really want to start pushing is if you subscribe to the show at YouTube, which is completely free to you, you will get notified anytime the video goes up, and it really does help out the show. But the real fun thing is we do a Twitch stream of the show each and every time, every Sunday at 8 p.m. Pacific at twitch.tv/crashthepond. You can help support this show in a way completely free to you that does help out a lot. If you have Amazon Prime, you get one free Twitch Prime gaming sub each and every month. You do have to hit that subscribe button after 30 days to re-up. But it does help a lot. It gets you special emotes in the chat and special badges next to your name. So we've got this question from Ginger Wolf. Said 2 questions. Does the organization actually not understand that they don't have elite scoring talent in the current lineup? Do you think that they know that, or do you think that they believe that Raquel and Silverberg should be 30-goal elite goal scorers in this league? I know I'm putting you in the position of Dallas Eakins and Bob Murray, so tread lightly. But do you think that they realize it?
I think that they believe that those guys can be first liners because they have been at various points in the past, or at least that they've been close to it in the past. And I think that they can get back. I just don't think that they fully comprehend how players tend to decline at this stage. Like, the Ducks don't seem to really buy into aging curves.
No.
If you look at how they go about their contracts to older players. So I think that they do still believe that. And I think that they also probably are cognizant of the fact that they could upgrade. But I think that they're unwilling to pay the price that would be required to get that done because they also don't want to give up what that would cost. They overvalue. Like, for example, flipping a Josh Manson, right? They probably still think that he is a top-end defenseman, or flipping a Ricard Raquel to get an upgrade, or whatever the case may be. They don't seem to be willing to pay the price, and that kind of an issue.
Yeah, definitely. He also had a follow-up. Did you see the hit on Kasha? Because I did not.
No, I didn't see it.
Okay,
but
so
it's unfortunate.
Yeah,
it's kind of a recurring theme with him, which really sucks.
Yep. Dalton Keys asked, question, do you think the points difference between first and last in the division will be closer than normal seasons with this unique setup? So
I think it could be wider, wouldn't it?
I think it's going to be smaller because they're playing less games, but I think
the proportional gap.
I think it depends on the division. I think when you look at the Pacific,
okay.
I think when you look, or the West, whatever they're calling it, where you've got these top-heavy divisions where you've got Vegas and Colorado, they're going to rack up a lot of points playing some bad teams. And as we talked about, the losing points to those teams is not going to be abnormal in this division.
Meanwhile, in the North, you have the Senators beating the Leafs.
Exactly. So I think there are going to be some divisions where 1 to 8 is not going to be that stark of a difference, and I think there are going to be other divisions where it will be a massive, massive divide. And I think it's mainly.
Chicago.
I think it's going to be mainly due to composition. I think the West is probably going to be the biggest. I think that Chicago and Detroit are the worst teams in the league, I think, potentially, but I don't know if there's a necessary powerhouse in the Central like the West has.
You just lost your Hurricanes fan.
The Hurricanes are good. I just think Colorado, look at the spanking they put on St. Louis.
The reigning champs?
I guess St. Louis or Tampa, but you got Colorado and Vegas. So
and they are just very clearly better than everyone else after that.
Yeah, Colorado lost that first game to St. Louis and just dropped, what was it, 7 goals? Was it 8? How many?
Yeah, 8-0.
It was nuts. All right, so M. Young asks, I know we didn't get a good sample size of the power play, but it seems like the Ducks have 2 separate units, not a 1 and a 2. Especially because Grant is on the number 1, LOL. What would your guys' ideal power play unit be? So
I actually think that one of the units that they rolled out with, I think it was Terry, Steele, Getzlaf, Fowler, and I think Raquel may have been there. It was someone. I don't hate that combination. I don't really hate either. I think Grant is kind of a waste of a spot there, but I don't mind the setup that they've got right now. To be honest, it's such a small sample, and they really haven't had much setup time that I almost cannot evaluate it. But I will say that the one thing I did notice, which I think is going to pay dividends, Ryan Getzlaf looks really comfortable down low behind the net. You saw him use that extra time and space to really kind of leverage his hockey sense and his playmaking ability. And I think that he will, I mean, should things kind of settle down there and they're able to just keep the puck in the zone, which if Cam Fowler is the point man, I don't know if that's going to be possible, but I think Ryan Getzlaf, he's in a really good spot back there. And I think that that change was a long time coming. It never totally made sense for me to have him all the way at the blue line, even going back to the Boudreau days. So I think that that is a good change that should pay off.
Yep. All right. So Fat Geralt said favorite team on each new in each new division.
So this is North and Central.
North Central
Oh,
East.
oh, okay. So all of them. Okay. My favorite team in all of them?
Mm-hmm. I mean, the North's easy for you.
Yeah, who could have possibly be there? By the way, Montreal Canadiens just spanked the Edmonton Oilers.
Drink.
Just beat them down. Although Carey Price had to be really good in that game, but yeah, Canadians of course there. Central, I mean, my favorite team. I mean, this is not something I've thought about before, but I maybe a bit of a front runner pick, but I really do love watching the Tampa Bay Lightning. Nikita Kucherov is one of my favorite players. I mean, I don't know. Where are you at in the North and Central?
Well, Kucherov's not even on the team. North.
I know, but Braden Point. I mean, just go down the list. I love watching Braden Point. So whatever.
You're gonna hate me for this. The North. I'm probably gonna go with Toronto.
What? I thought you liked the Habs.
I do. Don't like those are the two teams that I do like out of there.
Like you could have picked anyone else, and you picked Toronto.
I'm allowed.
Picking if I'm a Red Sox fan or whatever.
I'm allowed, not being a fan of either team, to say that I enjoy both of them. You know.
Surprised you didn't pick the Jets or the Senators.
Ugh. But no, I think that the Leafs are probably my favorite because I find them kind of the most intriguing.
They're very fun to watch.
They're very fun to watch. I think they're an intriguing team. The fact they have Joe Thornton, I mean, Jason Spezza will probably still be there.
Looks good.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it doesn't hurt playing next to Matthews, but yeah.
I'm curious to see how their defense goes with adding TJ Brody. So that's what I put there. You said what? Central. I'm gonna go with the Hurricanes. My Canes, going with it, sticking with it. And then in the East, I think I'll go with the Rangers.
I mean, I hate a lot of teams in that division, as you can imagine. Rangers, yeah, they're really fun. Good tarps. Good tarp game in that arena. I think that's something that we haven't discussed enough.
Yeah. Curious. Hey, real quick before we have one more question. Ducks tarp prediction.
I'm gonna go very minimal. There's gonna be a lot of seat exposure, I think. And
black. Yeah,
Lame.
that's what I think they'll do.
Lame.
I hope that they go orange. Give me those orange tarps.
I think orange, or even just go like orange, gold,
orange, black. Orange, black, like swapping.
Yeah, I mean, I think they could have something really cool, but
yeah,
if we're gonna judge their bare minimum approach so far to marketing, yeah, it's
Dalton Keys bringing up how boring will Honda Center be. Yeah, I mean, the winner right now for tarp game for me, in terms of overall presentation, is Philly. The fact that they've got the fact that they've got a gritty stand is just perfect.
Well, Vegas is up there too. I mean,
they
tried.
Here's a question for Vegas: are their seats usually red and gold, or was that something that they put on the seats?
No, I mean, I'm pretty sure this is new.
Okay.
But yeah, with the Ducks, is it bad that I missed the old color of the seats? Like the
I do too. I don't like the red. I don't like the black. I miss.
It's kind of lifeless.
Like the red. I mean, I guess the red reminded me that it was like the pond because it matched that.
Yeah. There was something kind of like nostalgic about it.
The black almost feels like it was one of the things I liked versus like Staples Center, whereas the black now kind of makes it feel Staples Center-y in a way. And getting into it even more, the old top of the boards used to be red. And I think changing them to black made the rink look different. And I miss that it used to have a red. And now, granted, I know the black is safer on the top with the material that was used, so good for them on that. But I miss it. I miss the red top of the boards.
The thing is with those seats, that color, you knew when you tuned in, like you just had to look. You knew it was Honda Center right away if you're just like flipping through games. Okay, but the East. I mean, who did you pick again? Oh yeah, the Rangers. The Rangers might be my pick. I love Artemi Panarin. Alexi Lafreniere is someone that I'm watching, keying in on. You know what? Yeah, give me Rangers. I mean, I don't love it, but there's just no one else really that I can root for. I guess I like watching Ovechkin, and I want to see Daniel Sprong do well for the Capitals. But yeah, sure, give me the Rangers. Good tarp game.
Yep. Let's get to this question. Then there's a couple more things I want to bring up. Duxco asked, are there any way too early prospect talk? Are there any good prospects to keep?
Get an assist in a check game again?
Are there any good draft prospects for this upcoming draft to get excited about? I mean, Owen Power's the name everyone's talking about. Matty Beniers looked good at World Juniors. Outside of that,
I'm going to be 100% honest. Don't ask me that until a few months from now. I'm not in draft prep mode right now.
Yeah. So, and then we got a question, and this was actually the thing that I wanted to talk about next. So perfect timing there. I'm trying to find the information right now. But the reverse retro, the Ducks are going to be wearing it a grand total at least, and this is something I should qualify it with, at least at home 2 times.
Uh-huh.
And I would say there might be potential that they wear it on the road. If you look at the Kings reverse retro schedule, they do have a home game against the Ducks that they are going to be wearing the reverse retro in. So if you looked back on when it was released, the key thing was they did this for rivalry games. The Ducks are wearing it against, I believe it's Colorado and Vegas. Not exactly your high-profile rivalry games for the Ducks. So a little frustrated that those are the games that they are wearing it for. A little frustrated that it's only 2 home games, seeing as I believe this is the best look the Ducks have had in years. And I don't think that is even that controversial of a statement.
It's a touch controversial, which might explain the lower volume than we expected.
So here we go. February 26th, April 9th are the 2 dates for those games. And I believe the third jerseys, I'm trying to figure out. Oh, here we go. The orange third jerseys will still be worn throughout the season. They're going to wear it on February 18th, March 5th, March 6th, March 18th, April 28th, April 30th, and May 1st. And for anyone out there wondering if maybe it's just the Ducks or maybe other teams are only wearing their reverse retro 2 times, I believe Arizona is wearing it every single Saturday from in February and March.
And they've got fans to show it to. So
true, but
I mean that shouldn't change anything. But.
Yeah, but still, I would have liked. This is such a good look. It's going to be frustrating that we only get to see it twice throughout the season. I hope that they wear it on the road. I mean, it's such a the fact that it's white makes me hope that they wear it against LA in LA. Like, it just sets up too perfectly. I hope they potentially wear it in Arizona. That would also work out so perfectly with the purple versus it. And I think the Arizona one would be just such a fun jersey matchup between the 2 teams.
Yeah, this is a you problem.
Sure.
This is
all right.
Or I'm saying this is something for you to deal with. I'm agnostic to it.
M. Young asks, and this will be the final question from the Twitch chat. Says he's obviously off to a great start with 3 goals in 2 games, but do you think Comtois will be sticking with the lineup for the entire season?
That is a great question because I don't think that that's a guarantee. I mean, Max Comtois was used very sparingly last year, and he's done this before. Like, he has had hot starts before and hasn't stuck around. Now, of course, he's older now, more experienced, so the likelihood of that happening, being sent down, is lower. But yeah, I don't know if it's a guarantee that there's other guys that they may want. I mean, Max Jones, when he gets healthy again, Sonny Milano, maybe that they put him in over Comtois and keep Lundestrum in. I mean, who knows, right? Galaxy brain things could happen. So I wouldn't set it in stone, but I do think the way he's playing, and not just his own individual play, but the way that he works with that line, I would be surprised if he does get sent back down. I think this is the season where you try to really find out what you have him as an NHL player beyond just like a cameo like we've seen in the past.
Yep. So I think that's probably going to do it for tonight for us. We've covered a lot, talked about a lot.
This was a mammoth.
2 hours and 13 minutes right now is where we're at with this show. So
hey, you know what? We're back. We've had plenty of time to rest. So we're better than ever.
Yes.
I'm calling our shot right now. We're better than ever. This was a lot of fun. For me, it's such a joy to be talking about games again, talking about new things. And I'm super happy and really just honored that everybody's jumping in, asking all these questions, engaging with us. The watch along that we did on Thursday. So more of that to come. This is just the beginning of what should be a fantastic season. Um, I'm about to talk about a few ways that you can support the show, but Jake, did you have any other things you wanted to drop in there before we wrap things up?
Nope. Think I'm all good. I mean, if you want to start, we got a brand new spanking review from
Yep.
Apple
So
Podcasts.
Yep. So one really easy way to support the show that has zero cost to you, it's just a couple minutes of your time at very most, depending how in depth you want to be. Just search Crash the Pond on Apple Podcasts. And if you leave a rating and a review, it goes a really long way, helps us climb those charts. And we just love to hear from you guys, and we will read your review on the show. So let's just dive right into this one. Not the podcast we asked for, but we're a lottery team. That is the title of the review. Love to hear that. This is from Nick. Nickname was taken 6969. So love that as well. Nice. 5-star review. 5 stars to pump the tires on the best Ducks podcast I can find. So hopefully that means he found all of them. Otherwise, that might kind of limit the breadth there. I can find. If you're a fan of hard-nosed, old-time hockey and you feel like analytics are taking over the game, it's good to get outside your echo chamber and listen to dudes talk about chance generation instead of hits. That being said, these cats put way too much emphasis on shot generation while ignoring the fact that Nick Deslauriers, led the league in fights last year. So love that review. Nickname was taken 6969.
Yes.
Little tongue-in-cheek action there. Always love that.
I really appreciate it. And I think it's actually really nice to hear that I definitely agree. I think it's always good to go out of your comfort zone no matter what. And I'm very happy that we could do that for him. I try to make sure to listen to a bunch of different things, go to a lot of different avenues, to whether it's listening to Hockey Central, where it has Brian Burke, who's very old school in his mentality. And I think going outside of your comfort zone is good. I will say this. I'm an engineer, so my brain goes to math always.
Well, I'm not an engineer, and I still look at the stats, so there you
True.
go. But yeah, so we really do appreciate that, and I just want to add to, like, that is kind of what we're trying to accomplish, right? We're trying to give you maybe a different way of looking at the game than you've looked at before, and maybe we think it's even a better way, but regardless, we still factor in, hey, if Nick Deslauriers has a big fight, we're going to talk about it. It's not like we're ignoring everything else. Love that little comment. Love the review. So just search Crash the Pond on the Apple Podcast app. Now, if you really enjoy the show, if you want to kind of take it up a notch, especially if you enjoyed just the back and forth, the banter, I have a really good option for you here. So patreon.com/crashthepond. Yes, we are on Patreon. A couple different tiers there where you can support us. So for $1 a month, $1 every month, you get access to our Discord chat. And I got to say, it is absolutely worth all 100 cents because you get access to a chat where you've got some diehard Ducks fans that are in there every game. Even during the World Juniors, just going back and forth on the Ducks. You'll learn things being in there. People bring up great points. It's one of the rare places on the internet where it's just, it's kosher. Everyone's just there to have a good time. No trolling or anything like that. So highly recommend that dollar tier, if nothing else, but you can upgrade that even further. So for $5 a month, you get access to not only the Discord chat, but also 2 bonus episodes where, sometimes it'll be a little bit more on the lighter side, or with the added time, without the constraint of having to recap games, we'll also go more in depth onto different Ducks topics or league-wide topics. Sometimes we go completely outside of hockey and talk about The Mandalorian. There's just, the world is our oyster with those podcasts, and I think that if you enjoy the creativity, the back and forth, you will enjoy those episodes.
I just had an idea. We should do an episode about WandaVision when it finishes. You need to watch WandaVision.
About what?
WandaVision. You need to watch it.
1 or 2 divisions?
Wanda.
I know.
Wanda is a name, Felix. No, I want to add. I want to add this real quick on the Patreon. It hit me this week with the Discord, and so shout out to everyone listening to this that are in there and active in there, or if they're looking at becoming more active in there. But that's become my favorite place to talk Ducks hockey. And I don't
Boom.
think it's even close. Just going in there, chatting with everyone, it's just such a fun time. It's very, I don't know if wholesome's the right word, but everyone's there just to be able to talk.
Yeah, it is
And
wholesome. Like,
and
come on.
and I think it's just it's my favorite place to go whenever anything breaks to talk about a game. I think it's just such a fun place to be.
Yeah, I actually look forward to the reactions of different people. I mean, we've got so many great patrons in there, and everyone brings their own little flavor to the chat, which also makes it
Yes.
interesting.
And
Um,
I also do want to mention that for the we're going to be doing one more watch along this month, date undecided, but that is going to be available for any patron. So whether you are at the dollar tier or $5 tier, for this month only, that's going to be for everyone. And then next month we're going to probably add a tier
yeah,
for that specifically with 2 of those a month. So
yeah. So
if you're
yeah,
interested in having a watch along where essentially Felix and I are commentating over the game and having a good time, then consider becoming a patron and joining in. You get a sample of it this month, and if you like it, you can join at that tier next month.
yeah, that's definitely a great point. And just to build on that a little bit, with the watch alongs, what we're doing is we're watching the game along with you, as the name would suggest, but we are still adding our own commentary. We're not really doing like a play by play or anything like that, but we, I think, can give you maybe a different look at the game while it's going on, throw in maybe some stats or point out some matchup things or point out some schemes that maybe you're just not going to get from a traditional broadcast. And, we're not trying to put down those broadcasts, but this is just a different look. And if you enjoy how we talk about the game, I think you'll enjoy watching it with us, right? And maybe in the future, when things settle down, we'll be able to do that in person again. But of course, still a number of other ways that you can support us. YouTube.com/Crash the Pond. So a lot of people like watching podcasts in video format, and you can certainly do that there. Jake will upload the Twitch stream there after, or the Twitch video after each broadcast, and so you'll be able to see our faces there for better or for worse. See us break things down. You'll see all the charts that Jake puts up, which I think that does add a little value there. So make sure to subscribe to us there, youtube.com/Crash the Pond, and activate your notifications. That way you know instantly as soon as we put up another video. We are on Spotify as well. So if you are like me, who is increasingly listening to podcasts on Spotify, well, then I recommend it. Search Crash the Pond there. We're on all your favorite platforms. Make sure to check out our website, crashthepond.com, crashthepond.com/shop. Get yourself some merch, get yourself some great looking t-shirts and hoodies. I mean, why wouldn't you? They look great. Check out Jake's article. I think that this is, if he does keep this up, pending, it's going to be a good little series or a good series about series, looking at how different deployments happened, how the series shook out between different teams. So definitely go check that out. It's up right now. Ducks versus Golden Knights series in review. I would highly recommend that. Now, one other thing that I did want to mention, talking about clothing. Hey, if you're looking for some new comfortable clothes for the work from home life, go to Mack Weldon, and when you check out, use that code CTP. You'll get 20% off. We are on social media. Crash the Pond on Facebook, at Crash the Pond on Twitter. Fun account to follow in game. Depending on who's running it that night, you will get a different look. And I think for that alone, if you want a little spice, a little variety, highly recommend that. Jake is on Twitter at ReindeerGames91. Got to give him credit. Credit where credit's due. Your account has kind of dialed it in since the season began. A little less wrestling, a little less.
Yeah, it's almost as if when there's actual Ducks hockey to talk about, that I'm able to stay focused and not branching out into all of these other things because I actually have things to talk about.
Less Korean baseball, more Ducks hockey. That's what
Did
we
I
want.
ever really tweet about Korean baseball?
I don't think you did. It's just the most random thing I could think of to kind of attribute to you.
You could have gone with Japanese wrestling as the most random thing to attribute to me.
See, so I wasn't even that far off then, to be honest. Okay. And then I am on Twitter at Felix_Sicard. So that will do it for us tonight, guys. If you have made it this far, and if you made it to any point of our show, thank you so much for listening. And we will talk to you at the next show with 4 more games to talk about. So, giddy
Bye.
up.
Bye.